Welcome to day 9 of our daily broadcasts here from the We Don't Have Time studio in the Nordic Pavilion at COP26 in Glasgow. We bring COP26 to you from Glasgow and also from our hubs in Stockholm, Washington, D.C., and also in Nairobi. And for those of you present here in the studio, please put on your headphones for a more enjoyable listening experience here. Today we will listen to top speakers like Sacha Ghiglione from Prime Computer, to Ingmar Rentzhog from We Don't Have Time, and also to Claire Shrewsbury from RAP. You'll also hear about the challengers and meet the players who are moving ahead of their competition and lead the way with bold climate action. My name is Catarina Rolfsdotter Jansson, and I am the host of this broadcast together with Nick Nuttall.
Hi.
Hi, Nick.
Yep, hi.
And for your information, Nick was the Director of Communications at the COP in Paris, COP21, and you have been present, well, you were present at the first COP.
Yes, I actually covered the first COP when I was on the Times newspaper in London, when Angela Merkel was the Environment Minister and presided over the other nations. So that's going back a bit, yeah.
It is indeed. So Nick, tell us about the theme of this broadcast tonight. We're going to talk about circular electronics.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely clear that we're having an absolute boom in electronics. It's now become the new industry. COVID-19 has fast-forwarded a lot of the ideas and thoughts about how to live and work remotely. And of course, therefore, we're going to get a big surge in products and all kinds of equipment linked with circular electronics. So we want to have a look at that. Yeah, what does it mean?
Excellent. And with us, as always, we have Anita Zoyna, who is our Green Zone reporter. So please join us here on stage, Anita, and give us your report. What happened since yesterday from your perspective?
Yesterday we had several meetings and too many strikes going on with the same discussion like the one we had last week. People are not feeling included. Mm-hmm. But today we had a lot of discussions revolving around gender and climate crisis. So we were trying to understand how climate crisis affects women more, women and children more, and how this should be solved, whereby we had a lot of points around involving women in climate education, since they're the people who contribute much to food production, and climate crisis is now affecting our food production. They're the same people who also need to provide food for their families. So we need to include them in this discussion so that they can understand that it is the climate that is changing. For example, farmers who are going out to sow their seeds and they never see rains like usual. So they have to understand that this is a climatic change problem, and also including women in the policy making, and also going to the community level to understand the challenges that they're going through so we can be able to solve. And I got a story from some people who live in the Sahel region and how they have been affected as women more, where when they have issues such as flooding and all those things, men escape and leave them behind because they are more vulnerable. So a lot needs to be done in the whole, in the entire climate crisis issue. So this is not to say that climate crisis or effects don't affect everybody. It does affect everyone, but does not affect us equally. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Anita, for sharing this important perspective with the viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow again.
Yeah, see you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So Nick, please give us an update. What has happened so far?
Well,
what's ahead?
Yeah, I think today was a bit kind of curious in some ways because the NGO Carbon Tracker have been crunching the numbers on what everything amounts up to in terms of the run-up to COP and in terms of what's happening at COP, in terms of will we keep to the 1.5 degrees centigrade target? And they came up with their assessment that, in fact, we're going to have a 2.4 degrees centigrade world with the pledges we now have on the table. And this is a bit confusing because we had Johan Rockström on of the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impacts near Berlin only last week, saying he was a bit more chipper, a bit more upbeat, because he thought the pledges amounted to about, say, 1.9 degrees centigrade, so much better than what was on the table at Paris. Somebody else has said, I think it was the International Energy Agency, no, it's 1.8 degrees C. And I think somebody needs to clear this up, because before we leave this COP, I think we need to understand the assumptions on where these different estimates are being made. They're all better than what was on the table at Paris in terms of the future, but we need to have a solid idea of which ones of these really make sense.
And Nick, speaking of numbers, we always have this counter, and it's getting more depressing every day we watch it. But please tell the viewers that might not have watched before, what is this about?
Well, you know, the International Monetary Fund came up with the numbers on the amount of fossil fuel subsidies around the world just before COP. It's a complex calculation, but it runs into trillions of dollars being spent on subsidizing fossil fuels, and people would therefore say subsidizing the destruction of our world. And we started this counter on how much has been spent on fossil fuel subsidies since the COP began. And since the COP began, it's now over 151 billion US dollars, and that's pretty eye-watering, as we keep saying. Yeah. But before we move on to the next bit of a show, I keep bumping into people walking down the corridors, and I bumped into an old friend of mine, Jackie McGlade, who was the head of the European Environment Agency and then the chief scientist of the United Nations Environment Programme. And Jackie, you're no longer with the UN. You're actually working on a new startup company. Just tell us what it's about.
Well, I realize that, of course, that when you have all these big numbers like this, actually the public want to know, is it real? What's actually happening? So what I decided to do when I left the UN was to go back to basics and see, can we come up with a proper, auditable way that is scalable to give people confidence? So when you say it's carbon negative, carbon positive, electronic goods, the circular economy, we can actually provide the number, and that's what this new startup does.
Wow, and you're really focusing just at the beginning perhaps on land, and that's very important.
Land is the big unknown. Everyone said we'll just sort out the energy and then the planet will take care of everything else. Well, my feeling was, as a chief scientist, it wasn't going to take care of itself. So we need to give guidance to people who have land to take care of it. And using our new kind of data and analytics, they can actually see down to 10 meters what is happening on their land. And it's making a difference already in Australia, in Kenya, all over the world.
Right, so farmers can basically know how much carbon is in their land, how much carbon is needed to restore that land.
Exactly.
And also, in a sense, a strange kind of coming back with the link to the fossil fuel subsidies, because just make that connection for us.
Well, the connection is that they have, through years been told, get these kind of fertilizers in there, get these pesticides in there, get all these chemicals in. Most of them come from the fossil fuel industry. is a sort of hidden bit. We don't talk about the chemicals industry here, but frankly, those subsidies also need to take count of all the things that we make, the plastics that we have in our lives. But farmers are particularly susceptible. So they're the unknown piece of the fossil fuel subsidies. Huge amounts. $1 trillion go into some of these products.
Right.
So by showing them that they don't need it, by showing them a different way to run their land, what we do with Downforce is to actually direct people to say, you can do something different with your land. You have your cattle over here, or you do your crops here, and here is the land that you can get the most out of to invest in carbon, in conservation and so on.
And get paid for investing in the carbon.
And get paid. And investors love it because they can rely on these numbers.
Oh, this is fantastic, Jackie.
Thank
I
you.
think we're going to have you on a future show and get more detail on this.
Thank you so much. It's been
Thank
great.
you very much for being on the show.
I'll pass by again. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye
super.
now.
Bye,
Bye.
Jackie.
What a wonderful surprise guest.
Yeah, a very great surprise guest. Yeah, fantastic.
Excellent. So from this stage, we connect with our hubs, and it's time now to connect with our hub in Kenya. So let's see if we can say hello to Dr. Robert Ngunda Josephine, who is the moderator of our Nairobi hub. Let's see how he and his team are doing. How are you today?
Hi, Catarina and Nick. How are you doing? We are doing very well here in Kenya at Mount Kenya University for the day 9 of the broadcast. How are you guys doing in Glasgow?
So Robert, tell us about the guests you have behind you, please.
Okay, so today we are quite excited for the session on circular electronics. And it's quite an interesting topic for Kenya and Africa at large, especially with the growing increase in demand for electronics. But also the new conversations emerging around whether we'll be able, this is a sustainable process for Africa and the amount of waste, electronic waste that we are getting and what to do with that. So we'll be interested to hear conversations, which will be led by one of our moderator, Professor Kevin Njeru, who is not yet seated here. But he's going to be looking at which opportunities we have in terms of investment in R&D for hardware manufacturing, in terms of waste management, especially the electronic waste, and seeing if there are ways for reconstruction and recovering of functionality as a way of extending life for electronics. So he'll be taking us through that. Professor Njeru is a professor of computer science and information technology with a focus on green information technology and information systems. So he'll be taking us through that. But also in our panelists, we have two ladies who are with us today. One is Rukia. Rukia is a student here at MKU. She's been with us for the last 9 days and been very active in guiding us in a lot of thoughts processes around women and climate change, and especially bringing interesting perspective from the northern Kenya arid and semi-arid areas, which have been historically marginalized. And also on the far side, we have Elsa. Elsa is one of our communications persons who work closely with Patrick here in Kenya, and she's been very instrumental in helping us shape up conversations and messaging, especially in reaching out to young people and mobilizing young people in Kenya. So we'll also be hearing shortly from her. And the person flanked by the two ladies is Patrick Kerry, the director of We Do Not Have Time here in Kenya, but also a newly nominee for the most influential young person in Kenya. So we are rooting for him. We should be knowing by the end of this session whether he's been able to win, but so far he's leading. So we are quite excited for the day, and we are looking forward, especially for the first conversation between Ingmar and Sacha. We're really looking for that. But also another interesting session is on procurement and supply, but we are keen to listen, especially what conversation are emerging in terms of the global dampage of electronic waste in Africa. So thank you very much, and over to you, Catarina and Nick.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. Exciting people that you have in your studio, as always. And let's now turn to Stockholm, to Christina Karlmark, who has 20 years of experience from the ICT industry, and she now works with us, and We Don't Have Time.
Hello, Catarina. Hi, Nick, and hi, Glasgow. Here is Stockholm.
Hello.
20 years of ICT industry, that's a pile of waste, right, if it's not circular. So I'm really looking forward to the theme of today. And like Nick said in the beginning, we're all using these gadgets, and even more after the pandemic or during the pandemic. So how can we make it circular? How can we make it endure much longer so that it's really serving us? So today will be a special day for me.
Well, we're very happy to have you on board, Christina. And well, I might say especially today because of your expertise. So thanks so much, and we'll be connecting back with you during the broadcast.
Thank you.
Let's now turn to Washington, D.C., and to the president of the We Don't Have Time operations in the United States, Dr. Shweta Chakraborty.
Hi, Catarina. Hi, Nick. Hello from Washington, D.C.'s hub. Maybe pub by the end of the day, but hub first now. I haven't seen Robert and Patrick since I visited Nairobi this past summer, and I realized we've had these check-ins every single day, and I haven't even said hello. So hello to my friends in Kenya, and congrats on putting together a fantastic group of people today. Looking forward to seeing your insights in Kenya, and then from Stockholm, and of course from Glasgow. We here in Washington, D.C. are observing COP26, of course, paying attention to the We Don't Have Time broadcast, and also paying attention to what is happening in Capitol Hill. We're just a stone's throw away from Capitol Hill, where the Build Back Better agenda is making its way through Congress. And we could know by the end of this week, by the end of COP, if $555 billion, the largest in US's history for confronting the climate crisis, if it will make it into law. So we are really watching that carefully, and we look forward to the panels today around Logitech especially. That should be really fascinating for our audience here in the DC hub. And thank you to Prime Computers. We're able to connect to you from Washington because of the sustainable hardware that you have sent us. So thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Shweta. And how about we check in with Freddie the dinosaur now?
Freddie the dinosaur, yes.
In New York. So let's check in with him.
This is Freddie's cousin that we're bringing out here.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to kick off this section on circular electronics with a conversation, a chat between two interesting individuals. One is Ingmar Rentzhog, who is the founder of We Don't Have Time. Ingmar, why don't you come up to the stage? And the other is our dear friend Sacha Ghiglione, who is the CEO and the member of the board of directors of Prime Computer. And Sacha, if you don't know Sacha, he provides startups with knowledge, understanding, and strategic thinking of the industry, of management in specific cases. He's the board member of the European Technology Chamber and the Climate Action Commission, and also contributes with his valuable know-how to foster awareness and support for the use of the European technology to reach sustainability goals, those are SDGs, and to reduce emissions. First, we're going to have a little video, is that right, before we move to the discussion between our two speakers?
So did you know that in 2019 only 17% of all e-waste has been recycled? This is crazy, right? So this is why we give your old IT hardware a second life instead of disposing everything. Prime Computer, you can give your IT hardware a second life. And instead of disposing, you can give everything back. Those products are given to people in weaker economics, in regions that can benefit from functional IT hardware. You will receive a credit for your old IT hardware, which then can be redeemed for new products. So Prime Computer has been founded in 2013 in Switzerland. Since ever we've trying to put on focus on quality. But the last 2 years since I'm here, a focus in addition is on sustainability. We're really proud of that. Sustainability. The Prime Mini 5 is sustainable due to the energy efficiency and saving up to 80% of energy. It is constructed in a durable, recycled aluminium case. Furthermore, we have a second life cycle, which allows the product to be reused in economic weaker regions. CSR is a really important topic to us. We believe the why we do something influences the how we do it. For instance, we only use EV and hybrid vehicles to move around. Secondly, diversity is a major important topic as we think how the more diverse our people from international background, then the better for everyone to benefit. And third, we have been announced climate neutral in 2020, and this has been a really great aspect for our organization.
Great. Okay, Sacha, very nice to know that you're on the line. Very nice to know that you're with us. We can see you on the monitor. That's the plan. And of course, I've got Ingmar here in the room. And I'm going to hand this over to Ingmar. Do you want to do the questions, or would you like me to do the questions?
I think Sacha is going first.
Sacha's moderating, is he? Okay. Sacha, you're the moderator for the first question. Over to you guys.
Hi, Sacha.
Great to see you guys. So yeah, Ingmar, we're both driven by the purpose of climate action. So how and when did it all begin for you? Maybe you're going to elaborate for the viewers here. This would be great.
Yes, I told this story quite a lot since I started the We Don't Have Time journey. The reason why I left my career in the finance industry was actually because of Donald Trump. Because of him, it became so clear to me that our world leaders will not act on the climate crisis. And if they don't do it, who will? So I wanted to contribute as an entrepreneur and try to do what I can do with my skills. It's kind of pointless to have a job, and if it's only about the money. It needs to be about something that is important, and what could be more important than saving this planet. So that was my journey into the climate. It was 5 years ago, actually today. So we are celebrating 5 years anniversary as an organization. We Don't Have Time. So that was my start into it. And I would like to ask you, Sacha, what was your start, and why are you always so positive about creating change? That is something I want to ask you.
Yeah, so first of all, happy anniversary. Congrats, glad I can be here with your 5 years anniversary. That's a great number. To your question, I think it's hope. It's such a simply but really powerful word. And I remember Dr. Jane Goodall, actually 3 weeks ago, that she released a book. It's called The Book of Hope. And I really loved her answers that she's stating in there. So I think it's human intellect, it's resilience in the nature, the power of young people, and it's the indestructible human spirit. And you know what? I feel actually like I need to. I cannot just stand on the sidelines with seeing and hearing all the amount of information that you and I probably get on a daily basis, right? Without doing anything. We simply need to do more. And another factor that drives me are my kids. So being a father of two, I am worried about the world they grow into. I want to be able to look them in the eyes in a few years and telling them, yes, I really did all I can to give your generation a better chance. It is out of greed, actually, that we are mostly misguided, and I want to encourage my peers and everyone around me to do all we can and really mean it by that. So yeah, hope is definitely a driving factor in there. Well, Ingmar, when I talk about hope, what can you tell me actually about your passion? Because you're a really passionate guy. So where does the passion come from?
I don't know, really. I always wanted to create stuff. I'm from a very creative family. I have 6 brothers and sisters. Almost all of them are entrepreneurs, and I'm the youngest one. So I have really seen that if someone has an idea about creating something, I've seen that it's possible to do it. So that is how I raised. And if you see that you can do stuff, it's hard not to be passionate about doing it. And sometimes it's hard for me to understand that not all people are feeling this passion. But when the magic really happens to me, it was actually when I started to work with the climate and I put a purpose behind this passion. If you combine purpose and passion, it will be unstoppable. Sometimes it's maybe too hard because you need to do something else than just work. So passion is not always a good thing if you want to have a work balance. But we need leaders that actually put the passion and purpose together. And we have too few leaders in this meeting and most places. On the highest level, and I think we need that, and I hope that my passion can inspire others to do the same. And it's a lot of anxiety when you think of the future, and I could say the best medicine against it is actually to act, to do something. I mean, you and me, we will never solve the climate crisis alone, but we can do our part, and that's the whole thing that is needed. If everyone are doing their part, and if everyone also are inspiring others, we will have this wave of change happening. So it's super important to do something, and if you have passion, find a purpose, and you will see magic things will happen. So that is my, I don't know. It's hard not to be passionate. I don't know where it came from, really. But I would like to answer you, Sacha. How do you think people like you and me that really feeling the passion for the climate, both the movement, but also the creating business as entrepreneurs in this space, how do people like you and me have more business leaders follow? I mean, it's a lot of leaders out there that are doing great stuff, but most of the leaders, they're just thinking of growing their business and growing their financial numbers, not doing it with purpose. How do we get more people to feel like you and me? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So purpose and passion, you're absolutely right. And I think always when I have a conversation with you, I feel the passion, and you transform it and give it to the others. And I think that's what everyone around you really feels. So I think on your question, that one thing that you actually always state is communication equally climate action. So it's really important for us that we keep up the good news, the solutions, and the potential. But yes, not only the potential on sustainable and changing and driving the world, but also the potential in the shift of making money. The greatest entrepreneurs of this decade are going to be out of the clean tech sector, and those creating solutions and businesses that help resolve the climate disaster we are in, like Frankie says, right, the disaster we are in. But also on what we can do to share our passion is to guide them toward the circular path. The circular economy actually can cut greenhouse gas emissions by up to 39% if enacted globally. And that is, I think, according the Circularity Gap report from this year. So I think it's a good transition here. Let's dive into circular electronics topic today and show them what we can and also should do here.
Yes. So what's next, Nick?
What's next is we have a keynote speaker. Have you guys finished your session? I thought you were carrying on there. You had so many other things to say.
We don't have time.
We don't have time, so we better get going.
For the next speaker.
Thanks, Sacha, very much indeed. Thanks, Ingmar. That was great. So now we're going to go to our VIP keynote speaker here on the stage at Glasgow. We're very delighted to have Claire Shrewsbury, who's Director Insights and Innovation at WRAP. She is responsible for WRAP's policy and insights work, technical support for local authorities, and grant management across the UK. The teams that work with Claire support the Department of Environment in this implementation of resource and waste strategy, and similar support programs for the devolved governments in Wales and Northern Ireland. Claire joined WRAP in 2008 and was previously a consultant with AEA Technology. Claire, you're going to provide a kind of global insight into one area of the waste and circular economy story that we've decided to spotlight this evening, and that is on electronics. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, and thanks very much for inviting me here to speak to you. And I've been fascinated by your counter there, and I think it's nearly got to 1 billion whilst I've been sat there. So I mean, it's just incredible.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's how quickly it's going up. But and quite rightly, much of the discussion is about decarbonisation at COP for energy, but what we need to think about also is products, the things that we use, produce, how we produce them, make them, and dispose of them. Because energy is only going to get us 55% of the way there to net zero. We need to look at the other things to get to the other 45%. So I'm here today to talk about a geo business brief that colleagues at WRAP talked about, help co-author on electronic waste and why that is needed to actually to become more circular. So before I start on some of the practicalities and what needs to be done, let's think about a few of the stats. So actually there's 50 billion internet devices worldwide in 2020. 50 billion. I mean,
Wow.
it's incredible. And probably went up during COVID because everybody rushed out and bought a tablet or something so that they could correspond with friends and family. So how those are produced and used and disposed gives rise to about 50 million tonnes of electronic waste per year. And this waste is set to produce 14% of all the global greenhouse gases by the year 2040 if we don't do something about it. And by 2050, it's estimated that that waste tonnage will be as high as 120 million tonnes. But what's really important is that there's $57 billion of material value in that waste. But as one of the previous speakers said, Sachin, only in 2019, only 17% of that was actually recycled. So what is key with electronics is that they're properly designed, that they're produced in a way that is sustainable, that they're recoverable, reusable, all the R's, refurbishable, remanufacturable, and obviously recyclable. So, and that will really ensure that they are really circular. We need to extend product lifetimes. We need to shift to more standardized design so that things can be disassembled for refurbishment and remanufacture. And this will mean that at the end of their life, when they're collected, the value that's inherent within them will be able to be got at, and we can extend that life. So in order to move to a more circular economy, we also need to improve and grow recovery networks and recycling infrastructure and repair networks. I was really struck today. My daughter came and visited me at the weekend, and due to her bringing a case home for me to bring to COP, she dropped her phone. So she's blaming it on me that she dropped her phone. She smashed the cover, and to get that repaired, she was quoted £700 today. So she has gone out, unsurprisingly, she's rushed and she's got a new phone. Because she's 19, how could she ever live without one? So, you know, that's not repairable, it's not economic to be doing it. We need more of that. We also need to examine new business models. These should improve and promote reuse and provide electronics as a service. And I've been talking quite a lot lately, the fact that I don't want to own a washing machine, but my friends and family quite like me to have clean clothes. So, you know, if that breaks down, I'm stuck. I need to have those clean clothes probably quite regularly. So more of a service model. But what really needs to happen in electronics is that they need to collaborate to generate the change that's required to prolong life and ensure that, this offers value at the end of its first useful life. So just thinking about the value chain for electronics, so it goes right back to raw material extractions. So there's some really precious, valuable materials in electronics. There's a manufacturing stage, obviously, and then there's a distribution and selling phase. Then there's us, the consumers, we consume it, and at some point there'll be an end of life. So businesses play a really key role across that whole supply chain. And the report, the GO6 report, what it does is it sets out a number of steps that transform the electronics into a circular economy. And I just want to sort of very briefly, in the last few minutes, run through those steps. So firstly, we've got to really incentivize and support product design for circularity. As I say, it needs to be disassemblable. We need to be able to have service models, and we need to be able to repair the electronics should anything go wrong. We heard in the VT that you know, the use of recycled content. You know, if you use more recycled content, it really does slow the demand for virgin materials and then the extraction of those materials from the earth. We need to transform consumption modes and demand, increase demand for circular products and services. And businesses can play a really important part in getting consumers and influencing their consumption patterns. We need to support new business models for environmental, financial and social triple win. You know, new business models can really help strengthen the customer relationship that you have. And of course, what's really important is that we encourage take-back systems, and that producers and businesses encourage us to give back those electronics at the end of that first life. Should businesses not be able to do that sufficiently, then there's policy drivers such as extended producer responsibility. And that then would mean that producers are paying for the collection, sorting and reprocessing of those materials. And of course, there'll be movement across boundaries. So that needs to be compliant and responsible. That's really important. The last few, so strategically, we need to really plan well and install recycling infrastructure. We need to think really carefully about the capacity, the location, and the speciality of those facilities, and plan that in to ensure that we get the most out of them. And I think the last few days, I only came up to Glasgow on Sunday, and the last couple of days, investment in this sector and in this area, we need to provide incentives so that we can then get the investment in for all of that infrastructure and those systems that are needed to change. And really the other thing that this transformation will enable to create environmental sustainable businesses and some really important, decent, formal jobs in certain, in the global south, for instance. I mean, we at RAP really know how tricky it is to work across the electronics sector. We've got some history in this space because it's a truly global sector and supply chain. But actually, given the size of the potential impact that this sector's got to have, it needs to really move quickly and now to make sure that it gets to that circular model. Thank you.
So much, Claire. That was really insightful. And can we clear up one thing for the audience out there watching the show? RAP. What does it mean? Okay, so RAP is an environmental sustainability charity based here in the UK, but we act globally as well. So we focus in around the big issues. So one of them is food, plastics, textiles, and in the past we've worked on the electronics system, electronics area as well. Right. And did RAP ever stand for something? Officially it stands for the Waste and Resource Action Programme. Aha. Okay, so, yeah. That wraps it up perfectly. Yeah. And I'm sure that joke has been told thousands of times. Okay, great. Stay with us, Claire. Okay. That was a really super presentation. I really enjoyed it. It was fascinating. I'd like to bring into this now, first, a short video on the supply chain and procurement story connected with this whole issue of waste electronics. Great. So we're continuing the show now looking at circular electronics, but also looking at the challenge of supply chains and procurement. And our first keynote speaker to follow Claire's VIP keynote is Wolfgang Lehmacher, advisor at Topan AG, Switzerland. The business book author is also host of the Supply Chain Innovation Network, board member of the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society in Singapore, and ambassador European Freight and Logistic Leaders Forum in Brussels. He is a founding member of the Logistikweisen, an expert committee under the patronage of the German Federal Ministry, BMWI, and the think tank Next in Singapore. Wolfgang, are you with us? If so, I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. And Claire, you have brought a lot of points home which are on my list. So I have to see that I reinforce the message, but maybe bring in a few additional points. So my talk is in fact about the supply chain transition and the importance to understand the magnitude of the challenge we have in front of us. And Sacha has already mentioned that reshaping supply chains gives us a lot of potential to reduce carbon emissions. And the numbers vary, but I think it is somewhere between 40 and 60% of carbon emissions we can reduce if we clean up the supply chain. And why is it that much? Because the supply chain is what every individual, what the entire economy, what business needs every day. And therefore, we can say the supply chain is, in fact, the economy, because the economy has been designed to deliver what we need and what industry needs. So that's why it has such a leverage when we look at supply chains and think about making them circular. What is the situation today? It is probably fair to say that 90% of today's supply chains are linear, that they are based on a principle which can be summarized as take, make, and waste. So according to numbers from the World Economic Forum and other research institutes and think tanks, it is only about 9% in average what we recycle. And we heard that it's about 20% in the electronics industry. But what is important to note is that the ratio is in decline. That means the recycling doesn't keep the pace with the growth of the electronics industry. And this is something which should alarm us to accelerate the efforts. And I want to speak about and probably reinforce a few elements Claire has already mentioned. And this is around what is needed, in fact, to transform the entire economy. And when I look at it, and having written my first pieces probably 10 years ago about circular economy, and looking at the progress, I think that we need to align the incentives. Incentives in multiple ways. Redesigning the economy means innovate the economy. So we need to put an enormous focus on incentivizing innovators, but also incumbents to come up with the new business models which have been mentioned. Today, it is more attractive to buy new products than repair the goods we have. And it's not even only an economical challenge, it's also a skill challenge. I don't know how many of the audience have tried to get things repaired. We have, in fact, lost a lot of our skill set in the area of repair, which means we need to make this industry, the repair industry, also more attractive and bring people into this. So we need incentives for that. Incentives could also be structured in a way that we reduce taxes on labor, because repair has to do a lot with labor, and increase taxes on resources to build in certain elements which help us to repair what we have done to the climate and to the environment. There are also positive developments. The US and Europe and other nations thinking about putting tariffs on certain product categories, also to equalize and level the playing field for innovators, incumbents that are investing within the territory in circular products and circular business model. And these business models, these new business models, is in fact the second driver. behind the incentives, because we are driving incentives for innovation, for labor, to allow exactly that development of new business models. And this is not an easy undertaking. So a business model is a complex construct, which is in fact the way business is done and business is created. So we need to help companies to build circular products, and it starts with data. That's a very important element. There is no circular economy without digitization, because how can companies build electronics if they don't know what the materials are, what is the nature of the materials which are used or are delivered to their factories, or which are used in components. So we need to have a strong focus on digitization as well. And finally, I think the biggest driver is knowledge building, because if more than 90% of our entire economy is built on knowledge of linear practices, we need to think about massive skilling and massive ramping up of the education system. We need new design thinking. We need new knowledge, deeper knowledge about material science. We need more knowledge about advanced manufacturing. It's not only about the materials, it's also about how the materials are put together, because that destroys very often the ability to recycle them. So for me, the key drivers are around the incentives, around new business models, and around education. And maybe a last point is that we also have to go not only beyond companies, because the excess material of one company can be the resource of another. We have to also to break the barriers between the industries, because there it is the same. The excess material of one industry can be the resource of another. So we need to move from industry thinking to an ecosystem thinking. We need, when we think about e-waste, an electronic ecosystem where everybody pulls together the excess material and where everybody collaborates with the others to reduce the waste and make sure that products, parts, and materials stay as long as possible within the system.
Thank you, Wolfgang. I had a feeling that when we strayed into the area of circular electronics, we were now straying into the whole area of circularity, which is so beyond what is really being discussed at this COP. I mean, here people are talking about, doubling renewable energy every 3 years, which is absolutely fantastic, and emissions here, emissions there. But it strikes me that if we are going to have a truly sustainable world, it's only going to happen when we actually embrace truly the circular economy and not just bits of it. Thank you very much. We're now going to another slightly swifter keynote from Robert O'Mahony, who's head of sustainability at Logitech. Robert drives Logitech's pervasive sustainability commitment to help sustainability become a principle infused into everything at Logitech. The company, a computer equipment maker and more, is, as of 2021, carbon neutral, aspiring to be climate positive. Robert, you have the floor.
Thank you, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I guess, we're talking about circularity in the electronics sector, and we do all know the numbers, and my previous speakers, Claire and Wolfgang, have done a really good job at giving us some impactful insights. And I'm certainly not here to impress with any additional statistics. What I would like to emphasize, however, is we're having this conversation at a time when the demand for consumer electronics is skyrocketing. It's resulting in industrial carbon emissions moving in the wrong direction, placing a significant burden on global e-waste streams. But with this great demand comes a great responsibility, I think. and an opportunity to drive significant change by advancing business models, as were mentioned earlier, and supporting changes to consumer habits to help tackle the mounting electronics waste. So my name is Robert O'Mahony, as mentioned, and I head sustainability at Logitech. I'm joining you today to talk about those frameworks and opportunities that are helping us address the challenge of circularity, along with material innovations and how we're holding ourselves accountable, and the collaborative partnerships needed to drive the change necessary. Change, quite honestly, that can no longer wait. So Logitech's ambition, in essence, is to empower consumers to extend the life of electronic devices, components, and materials. We don't have all the answers, but we're working hard to develop more circular production and consumption models to meet the growing consumer demand for electronics, while also addressing the need to reduce emissions, conserve natural resources, protect biodiversity, and sustain carbon sinks. So let me take a moment to talk to you about specific opportunities in a few key areas that are driving circularity at Logitech. The first is design for sustainability, or DFS. And that's all about starting at the concept phase, before any product exists, but where decisions around design can make the biggest positive impact. So we measure the sustainability impact of all our decisions, from raw material sourcing right through to end-of-life stewardship. We focus on impact reduction through the design of lighter, more efficient products that use lower impact materials and with less energy demand during life cycle phases. We've scaled up our integration of DFS into our new product introduction, our NPI process, and we now apply DFS language, principles, capabilities, and practices to ensure that NPI projects are measured and improved at every stage of product development. DFS performance is now a gating item at Logitech as part of our NPI process. And I want to share a couple of living examples of what this has achieved. First example is where we redesigned our best-selling M185 mouse by rethinking the printed circuit board layout. We did it at board level, panel level, and sheet level. The result is a total lifecycle carbon impact reduction per unit of more than 15%. And that's by simply applying DFS principles. Another example is with our Astro A40 gaming headset, designed to allow the user to upgrade the product with features such as sealed speaker tags, synthetic leather cushions, voice isolating microphones. But what that's done in essence is it's extended the life of an existing product and improved consumer experience without the carbon impact of an entirely new unit. We have a lot more opportunity in front of us, that's for sure. And we're pursuing that. So DFS then extends into legacy materials. And I think it's been mentioned in some way earlier, but the reality is much of the materials utilized in consumer tech today were developed in the last century, often with little, if any, regard for environmental, climate, or circularity considerations. Given this challenge, breakthrough innovation helps us reduce our carbon footprint. And I'd like to share with you just exactly what we're doing. We look for more circular materials by eliminating PVC, brominated flame retardants, phthalates, and other substances that might otherwise prohibit the reuse of these materials. Post-consumer recycled plastics and low-carbon aluminium are already being utilized in our devices today. And at a technology level, high-performing sensors have been developed with energy consumption in mind that are 10x more efficient than their predecessors. We're also shifting to water-based paints or entirely eliminating paint altogether to improve recyclability and circularity. And a key important program that's been running in Logitech this past while is our increasing use of post-consumer recycled plastics, or PCR. Many of our mice and keyboards are now in regular production at 75 to 85% PCR content. We're partnering with our suppliers to create a rainbow of PCR colors to increase options and drive this mainstream. We're on track to deliver 50% of mice and keyboard unit sales by the end of this year, utilizing PCR. All of this has eliminated more than 7,000 tons of virgin plastic from our supply chain and will result in a carbon impact reduction of more than 11,000 tons CO2 equivalent annual. In addition to designing or redesigning for sustainability, data-driven insights hold us accountable. So as part of Logitech's sustainability strategy, we've pledged to communicate the carbon impact of our products by becoming the first electronics company to commit to providing detailed carbon impact labeling across our entire portfolio. We already have products on the market in e-tail and retail now, demonstrating carbon impact numbers to the consumer, and we are intending to have all of our products covered by 2025. We've invited other electronics industry companies to join us in driving the change, and we've gone as far as making our carbon impact methodology, transparency labeling, available for others to use. Our hope is to encourage others to follow and build on our work. It'll take an industry-wide effort to truly make a difference. So the consumer is at the center of all of this. Consumers are looking for ways to reduce waste and often willing to explore ways to reduce consumption as a result. And the struggle to find ways to repair devices, I think it was mentioned earlier, is a real struggle. Changing consumer perceptions around reusing devices and materials is challenging, but key to ensuring a transition to a circular electronics economy. Logitech's approach is to extend product life first, refurbishing products and recovering components. And the strongest contributor of all is industry progress in collaboration. So partnerships and relationships are really important to us to drive towards a circular economy. We're committed to driving positive change and taking action through designing for sustainability, carbon labeling, and holding ourselves accountable and increase product circularity. We want to create paths towards a sustainable future where there are currently none. We know that to gain a critical mass, we need to collectively drive this forward as an industry sector. We don't have time to wait. So we're doing this within our circle of influence to make a difference and with an open door to collaborate. And we hope this will inspire others to act. And with that, thank you for listening.
Okay, Robert, if you'll just stay with us as part of the panel, and also Wolfgang as well. I've got Claire here, so she can't escape, so that's okay. But you guys are on the magic of Zoom. And then, so I'd just like to introduce one last speaker who's coming in on Zoom, and that's Christophe Lintz, who's the Director of IT at the European Patent Office. Just briefly, Christophe joined the European Patent Office in 1984. He holds director positions in various business areas and is currently Director IT with the role of CIO Senior Advisor. Christophe is leading the Information and Communications Technology Sustainability Project of the European Patent Office, since he is convinced that we all have to take action to reduce our digital carbon footprint. And the project is contributing to the European Patent Office carbon neutral by 2030. I can see you there, Christophe, so that's really good news. Okay, I'm going to fire off a few questions. We had some quite long, very good presentations, so I'll try and make this a bit more punchy and short. Okay, so here's the first question. Everybody, it sounds like a game show now, doesn't it? Everybody get ready with their buzzers. No. Come in if you want to come in on any of these questions. We know that digitalization and electronics have the capacity to reduce our emissions, dematerialize industry. The big question, of course, is the equipment itself. How can procurement by presumably governments, by cities, and by others actually contribute to getting the circular electronics more circular nationally and globally? Is procurement an important tool? Green procurement. Claire would like to come in. Can we hear Claire? Stop a second. That's not working, so take the handheld.
Yeah? Okay, right. So governments here across the world have enormous procurement power. Yeah. And if they have things like insist on recycled content or change their procurement specifications, that then it's a first mover that means that other people can follow. So actually I think government procurement is a really good step for everything for the circular economy, not just electronics.
Right. Are we seeing any of that happening, gentlemen? Do you notice any governments trying to source electronics through the procurement mechanism?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we're certainly beginning to see an inflection occurring around RFPs and the procurement process, where there's an interest being taken around the sustainable nature of the service of the product. Is it going as deeply as circularity? No. Would it be helpful if it did? I believe so.
Right. Christophe, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I can give, first thank you to invite me. The European Patent Office has embedded in its strategy policy for the procurement to embed sustainable criteria when we acquire, when we procure ICT hardware. So this is really mandatory, and it is also part of the assessment of the open tenders. And we have also, we go further, we have just published yesterday an open tender to recycle, to upcycle, to refurbish our ICT hardware in order to extend the life of our hardware and to get possibly carbon credits. So this is really the strategy of the European Patent Office to push the market to produce more sustainable hardware, and also to ensure a second life or even a third life of hardware to reduce the waste.
Christophe, being a bit of an idiot, you can probably see that by looking at me on stage. What is the influence of the European Patent Office in this area? Does it mean all European countries have to follow these rules? What is the influence of your office?
The European Patent Office is the authority to grant patents, innovations, in all the kind of technical areas. But of course, we also grant patents in the area of production of new of hardware in the computer fields and etc. So we contribute to the innovation, but we are not part of the European Union, and we are not defining the laws. We are just supporting innovation in Europe, and we regularly publish studies to demonstrate innovation. For example, to have more sustainable plastics, or to have, for example, more electric cars. Or so we have we have even developed what we call the kind of classification to find easier patents related to sustainable inventions. So we are contributing indirectly to promote new technologies, contributing to sustainability and circularity.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to higher standards and regulations. I think you touched a bit on this, Claire. I think others have touched on this. Higher regulations, higher standards. Do we see this happening in any of the economies around the world, any of the regions where we're seeing higher standards, higher regulations on the whole area of electronic equipment in terms of its recyclability, in terms of its, say, one day full circularity? And what does it also mean for trade? Because this is becoming increasingly an issue all around the world. You know, one place doing something with a higher level of quality, somebody else may be achieving a lower quality. Do we see higher regulations coming on this, or is it something that needs to come over time?
Now, maybe I take that, because I mentioned the tariffs which the EU and the mechanism which the EU wishes to implement. And this is not a standard, but it puts a penalty on products which are less environmental friendly.
Yeah.
So it depends how this plays out at the end for the electronics sector. But I think that leveling the playing field for Europe will not only help the Europeans, it will also help the world to move up the chain, the value chain, and develop and manufacture better products to avoid the penalties. So I definitely expect much more to happen going forward. We are at the beginning.
I think we're, in respect to Logitech, tell us a little bit about, you know, where does the role of collaboration across alliances and, you know, you mentioned that you were encouraging, for example, others to follow what you're doing. This isn't really regulation, this is more partnership, isn't it? And collaboration.
It's actually partnership in the absence of regulation. What we want to do is we want to move in a direction that we feel or that we've deemed to be helpful and beneficial. And we're not waiting for regulations to come by. We've done that. We've a history of that. So Logitech and the consumer electronics industry actually does too. If you look at social responsibility initiatives, the Responsible Business Alliance is a really good framework, actually, where back in 2005, a very small together in the absence of regulations to ensure that there was fair and equitable conditions within the supply chain of the consumer electronics industry. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about alliances with peers, competitors, like-minded companies to drive ourselves forward in the absence of regulation. Regulation, quite simply, isn't coming quickly enough, or it's not pointed enough.
Do others share that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's the... Sorry. I mean, there's the Eco-Design Directive that's coming forward, and that, you know, we in the UK are going to adopt that as well, I understand. So I think where we've worked previously on an electronic, what we call a voluntary agreement at WRAP, what we usually do is set some targets that the signatories of that voluntary agreement will align to. And we just, because of the nature, and maybe it was just too soon for the electronic sector, but we could not get them to align around some targets. So that's what's really important. You know, some of these partnerships now, they need to kind of commit together to say we're going to have X amount of recycled content, we're going to reduce the energy burden, you know, we're going to try business models, we're going to have take back, you know, and all of these things together. I mean, it can't be a lone player, you know. I mean, I really applaud what Logitech is doing, but it's you know, it can't do it alone.
Anybody share that view?
Absolutely, I share the view. I think it's, you know, it's a really sensible point that Claire has made, and you know, it's no one company, irrespective of their size, is large enough to make a significant difference here. And you know, the electronics industry has been really good at competing and being competitive with each other, you know, and it's given the consumer some great consumer experiences and products, but it's now getting in the way of our progress, you know. We need to sit down and talk. We need to have frameworks and the architecture, if you like, that will facilitate that engagement and allow for us to collectively move forward. Simply because we pull from the same well of materials. We all use the same stuff. We should all be looking to innovate that stuff to something new and better, you know, not trying to do it alone.
Okay, we're just going to deal with a couple of other issues here before we close, but I wanted to talk a bit about supply chains. And yes, I will be doing that, yeah. Just somebody was asking a question of me. Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about the supply chains. I mean, I understand that there are literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of companies possibly in a supply chain with some of the very, very big brands. How the devil do you get down to the fine detail of a supply chain? I mean, we know with climate change we have science-based targets. Supply chains are called Scope 3 targets, getting down to those. But with all these widgets and gadgets and all the other things that are in computer electronics, is it actually possible to do this? Anybody want to address the issue of supply chains?
Yeah, it is possible to do, but it takes a lot of effort. So what we need is much more transparency. So that's why I said, without digitization, there is no circular economy. We need to start to share, to establish architectures, a circular economy internet, to exchange the data and to establish standards. As I said, I think it's possible, and it's possible through electronics. It's a bit paradox, but it is what it is. And it starts with tier 1, and it gets harder with tier 2 and tier 3. Another element are certifications. So to ensure, we spoke about procurement. Procurement is a tool, especially for governments, but procurement has to fulfill certain requirements and standards. And I'm a big supporter of recycled materials, but we need to have a much more developed certification process to ensure that people know what they buy. So it's a complex question and a multi-layered answer.
Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be that you look to different industries to see how they're doing it. I mean, I know, we do a lot of work in the food sector, and the retailers are pushing up their own supply chains, and you can imagine how much, the ingredients going on, to all the different products that we've got on supermarket shelves. So it's starting to happen there. So maybe there's some cross-industry learnings to sort of understand how it's engaging its supply chain, and how the electronics can engage theirs, but appreciating it's more international.
Christophe, in the European Patent Office, Christophe, do you see any invention coming through your corridors, as it were, from people, companies trying to, somehow trace all these supply chains, better understand? I mean, people talk about blockchain, don't they, and some of these cryptocurrencies as being ways of tracking supply chains. Do you see any of this coming through the European Patent Office?
I'm sure that my colleagues who are dealing with these patents see all these patents innovations coming. It's very difficult for me to talk about this because I'm not the expert in that field.
Right.
But you have to know that for all the technology, we have about 5,000 patent examiners dealing with all the different technical fields. So I cannot give you a right answer.
Right.
But I'm sure that all innovation is coming through the EPO. Sure.
Okay. So let me now put a final question to everybody. So I'm old enough, to remember when we didn't have computers and really, no electronic devices. Now I'm being told that I have to use the cloud, which I don't know where it is. I can't kind of nail it down. I'd like to know where it's living. Will we get to a point where we actually have no material, live in a digital world with no material, that we won't have computers and keyboards and cameras sitting on top, that we will have dematerialized the whole thing, and all we're worrying about right now will have magically disappeared in a puff of smoke? Or is that dream on, Nick? Anybody want to take that question?
Yeah, I maybe I'll have a go, Nick. So when we moved to a laptop, we were told we wouldn't have desktops. We still have desktops. When we moved to tablets, we were told we wouldn't have laptops. We still have tablets, laptops.
Yeah.
When we moved to smartphones, we were told we wouldn't have anything else. We still have those. I fear that we like our stuff. I fear that, we are married to our devices, and that may continue to be the case. And that's why it's really important, actually, for those devices to be durable, repairable, last longer, upgradable, and so on. So they hang around.
Yeah, for me, it's a question: what is the timeline, right?
Yeah.
If we talk the next 100 years, probably the world will not change that much, right? That's our experience. If we think about maybe a few 100 years, nobody knows. But human creativity is limitless, and maybe we will have a more biological world.
Yes, we'll all be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the future, where it's more robot than man. Yeah. Well, look, before you all leave, we don't do this very often here at the We Don't Have Time shows, but we do actually have a lady here, a young lady, who wanted desperately to ask a question. So come into the center. Now, I have to tell you, the camera's always complex here. There is a camera there that's probably good to look at, and everyone can see you. Say who you are, where you're from, and what's your question.
Will do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear me. Good. Hi, I'm Olivia Carpenter-Lomax. I'm representing the Institution of Engineering and Technology, so I'm a volunteer for them. In particular, myself, I work in energy more than products, but I've been really interested in this discussion, and we represent all sorts of engineers. And we're trying to think about how to make sure engineers can start thinking like this. This is a real big leap in the way that engineers are thinking. And So I think I agree. I think one of the speakers talked about the need for education and to bake that into the understanding of engineers. If you speak a little bit more about that. And I also wondered, particularly from those of you in the field, whether you find that when you're employing new engineers, do you have to re-educate them? Do you have to kind of teach them the new ways of thinking of things? When you get new suppliers, do you need to explain to them why they need to think this way? Is it really difficult actually to be...
So do you have to educate people not only in the building of these things, but up and down the supply chains,
exactly, yeah,
where they're putting in all the widgets as well and stuff like that?
How difficult is it to be the entrepreneurs in this area, be the only ones doing this, because no one is thinking about this yet?
Yes.
Yeah, I can maybe give it a first shot. So I work with innovators in circular economy. I think that the skill set is learnable, so we don't need to de-learn and relearn, because the company, one design company I'm thinking of, there has not the major issue is not recruiting engineers. You can train them, you can teach them new things. The challenge is more on the sales side. So there is, in fact, a lack of demand. This is not electronics. I'm talking about more fashion and textiles. But if there were much more demand, bringing us back to procurement and public procurement, I think that would pull the right skill set at the end, because we all know that if we see the opportunity, a lot of people will jump on it. That doesn't exclude that we need to have much more research and build a much more broader base in the curriculum and in the education system.
Anybody else want to answer that? Do you have to basically wipe the hard drive of these young engineers? And
yeah, I'd love to answer it. And Olivia, I think really insightful questions. So thanks for posing them. The first thing I would say is we are challenged when we go to hire great talent. We're challenged around, what are you guys doing on sustainability? How can I be part of that, and so on? And that's a common occurrence now. So it wasn't 5 to 8 years ago, but now it's part of the interview process. That's the first thing. So people really care before they understand what impact they can have. The second thing is, I think every engineer and designer understands how to design responsibly. They do a module in college and then they tend to forget it, or for some reason, we remind them of it. But actually, we never have to motivate an engineer or designer to design a more responsible device or material or experience. It's self-motivating. The actual, as Wolfgang said, the knowledge is there. This is simply a different lens to design the same product. What you're saying to the designer is, you're not just thinking about the cost of the product, the schedule to market, or the consumer experience. You're now thinking about the sustainable nature of the product, and you provide tools for that. But the principles are the same. Remember, good design is responsible design, and that hasn't gone away. And this is the way engineers and designers think. So you don't need to wipe the hard drive. What you need to do is provide the tools and step out of the way and have people, make their impact and make a difference. And I can see how enthusiastic our designers and engineers are for this, for making the difference.
Christophe?
Yeah, I can complete with an example. I mean, at DPO, we raise awareness in the IT department on the eco aspects of design. And we, for example, we train our developers, web developers, to apply the best practices in eco design, which has an impact on the use of the website, but also on the tools used by the end users. And this is very powerful because they are eager to apply these best practices. They see the results because you see the huge improvement in the performance of the system, and you can measure the effect. And then you can put a label that you have an eco label of ABC, and people are very proud of this. Just to give you an example, and we do the same with the architects. We do the same with people in managing the the cloud is in fact a data center in Luxembourg with a power usage efficiency of 1.3, one of the best in Europe. And people are very proud to be part of this journey, to contribute to reduce our carbon footprint and to contribute to save our planet. And people join DPO. They are happy to join DPO because they know that we apply, we do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint.
I think it's also true this is happening all over the world now.
So
I mean, yeah.
You can apply for the job at DPO. You're welcome.
No, I mean, you even see in the oil and gas industry now that the big oil and gas industries are finding it harder and harder to recruit engineers because the young people want a company with a purpose that stretches beyond the short term, yeah. So, look, I'm going to wrap this all up here. I'm conscious that Claire, for example, has been standing here for at least 50,000 hours. She's probably now totally immobile. She's been in this position for so long. But I'd like to thank everybody who's been on the show. Thank you for the question here as well. And let's see how this story pans out. But it strikes me that circular electronics, as part of this bigger story of the circular economy, really is a new frontier for humanity. It's been talked about for a long time. It's starting to take off. And I think this is the secret to sustainability. It's not just the carbon targets under the Paris Agreement. So thanks very much, everybody. Oh, yes, Christophe, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say that the takeaway for me is that I will have a look if we can identify the inventions related to the circular electronics. And I will be happy to make it public for everybody.
That's great. Well, then we'll have you on our next show and you can give us the data.
Thank you very much.
Not just Logitech, right? Other companies. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great evening wherever you are. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Claire. Take that. Good. I just wonder now if we can go to our hubs first in Washington. Washington, hello. Are you with us? Hello, Washington.
Hello. Yes, I am indeed.
Great. Okay. What did you make of all that, Shweta?
Sorry, Nick, if you don't mind repeating that.
Yeah, what did you make of all that? I get a sense, Shweta, that when we're dealing with things like circular electronics, we're straying into this whole circular economy, and suddenly you realize it's a new horizon to just simply, the Paris Agreement, right? We're going beyond just trying to cut our emissions to actually working how we get all the materials that we use back into an almost perpetual motion of use to reduce our impact on the planet.
That's right. There was a lot to think about. And as a behavioral scientist, I found this really fascinating. One of the challenges that were raised is really how do we actually get to that critical mass through widespread behavioral change? How do we get people to repair their computers, not simply expect and want the newest, hottest technology? And it's something that we can actually learn from other sectors. We've learned that effective communications can actually lead to adoptions in new behavioral changes that are actually positive, that actually will support this circular economy idea. So the same way that we are seeing in fashion, this adoption of upcycled and recycled clothing and garments, the same way we're seeing people moving towards eating foods that are much more sustainably sourced, the same way that we are seeing overarching behavioral changes happen with the new information that we know, and that's becoming more accessible to the global population around the planet warming. We can apply all of this to actually seeing behavioral change as it comes to new technology adoption. And so I'm really excited. Actually, tomorrow I'll be giving my keynote on how to bring behavioral science into addressing some of these challenges and how effective communication can go a really long way in seeing this widespread behavioral change. I really am excited to share with our audience how even just tweaking how we frame some of our messaging, we are talking about some serious advances in behavioral outcomes. And so it's really exciting that we could potentially get a widespread audience to really fully be excited about repair over buying brand new. I'm telling you that can happen. I'll talk about it more tomorrow.
Good. Well, we're looking forward to that, Shweta. Okay, so can we now go to Stockholm? Can we go to the Stockholm hub?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Nick.
Yeah,
Stockholm
hi.
is here.
Good.
Yeah. You want my reflection on this?
Yeah, what did you make of all that?
Well, I really think this is interesting because both Claire and Wolfgang were talking about new business models.
Yep.
And the problem here is that for those producing, it's not a problem to produce the way they do today. Waste is just coming somewhere else, to someone else's problem. I think we need to make it their problem. So if they make things that become waste, it should cost them something.
Yeah.
And if they make things that are circular, they should earn money on that. So it's actually how do we change the incentives? Because we talked about, how do we prolong life? Nobody wants to do that. They want to sell as much as possible. Selling secondhand is tricky. How do we make it good for the producers to actually both prolong the life, repair it, and sell secondhand? So it's changing from the start, I think.
Well,
what
I think
they
that,
do,
yeah,
like
I think
Logitech is already doing.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you can go it alone as a company, but also it can go faster if you have the right incentives from, say, government, whether it's tax breaks on circular products versus. But I suppose governments need to know exactly, the provability and the certification that these things generally are circular. So it's probably a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We'd now like to go to our hub in Nairobi, not least because they have a special guest there for us. Could we try and connect with Nairobi, please?
Hi, Nick.
Hi, guys. How are you doing?
We are doing very well. Thank you very much. So here I am with me, Dr. Kevin Njeru. Dr. Kevin Njeru will be our guest speaker from Nairobi, reflecting on the green technology, information technology, and green technology information systems. So I don't know whether Nick will be on that side to introduce him formally. So
I
that
don't
he can
know.
take over.
It's up to you. I'm happy to do it, or you can do it. It's entirely up to you.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Okay. So Kevin Njeru is a professor of computer science and information technology. He is specialized in green information technology and green information systems for his master and his PhD research, and has published a number of research papers in the areas of sustainability as well as general information technology research areas. He has lectured in a number of Kenyan universities, including Mount Kenya University, where our colleagues are coming from, Murang'a University, the University of Kabinga, among others. He's also an aspiring senator in Kenya. So, Kevin, great to have you here. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here too. And I really appreciate this session where we are looking at computing and information systems and their impacts on the environment and general electronics. Now, one of the things that we say for maybe those who don't understand much about computing and its contribution to global pollution, we say that computers contribute around to 2 to 3% of the global environmental pollution. Now, any approaches or any innovations that are meant towards reducing this amount of pollution to the environment is what we refer to as green IT. Now, in the same field, or green information technology, in the same field, we have a field that we refer to as green information systems. And green information systems try to look at the various approaches in which you can be able to use information technologies to be able to reduce the carbon emissions that are contributed by the 97% that is contributed by other factors such as transportation, agriculture, in the manufacturing, and all those that is. Now, one of the panelists actually mentioned that within the COVID period, the global amount of maybe mobile phones and computing that we acquired are about 20 billion. So when we look at green information systems, we look at how can we be able to apply these 20 billion computers now to be able to reduce the amount of pollution that you're causing. For example, by simply teleconferencing, where we are just communicating from you guys from over the world when we're here in Kenya. That's a good approach, that is, of saving the environment, because we are asked, would be required, if it were not for these technologies to travel to the country, we don't have to travel now. We can be able to actually interact in real time from our different locations in the world. Now, on the issue of electronics and security, now I think what it calls for globally as accepted is that there is a need for lifestyle change. There is a need for lifestyle change, because, for example, when we talk about the question of extending the longevity, that is, of use of given devices, then it means, whereas I have the easy option of actually going and purchasing another device, but I'm environmentally conscious enough to be able to design, no, instead of purchasing a new device, let me have this device repaired so that I can use it for longer, that is. One of the other challenges or issues that have been mentioned by one of the panelists has been about the question of actually importation of computers, of mostly the second-hand computers for use in Africa and other developing countries, of which if we were to acknowledge, one of the biggest challenges that we face today is in Africa is about waste, electronic wastes. Now, in most cases, the biggest challenge that we have, yes, we understand we need to dispose these devices, but our systems, our recycling systems are not well established enough to be able to handle everything that is in such a way that it ensures we're able to recycle these electronic devices in a manner that is sustainable to the environment. So that when it comes to their disposal, they are disposed, you find them actually dumped together with other types of waste, organic waste that is in the various dump sites that we have around. And even when it comes to recycling these particular elements, or simply recycling these elements, those people who do it are not trained in any way, that is. In most cases, garbage collectors trying to look for valuables that is from the garbage are the ones who pick them, try to gather maybe some or get some of the components using their hands, and aware of the dangers, the health dangers that they face by actually trying to break these components together in search of whatever they are looking for, that is from the same. And therefore, the biggest challenge that we have around the world is a question of policy, and mostly from governments. So that you see, the biggest challenge of greening is that most organizations that actually lead greening are profit-driven organizations. So that if you are profit-driven, the first thing that you look at is the economic viability of any investments that you make. Whereas there is much proof actually from reports from various international organizations of the benefits of greening, much of the organizations, and especially in Africa, have not been able to assimilate all that into their manufacturing processes so that they can actually be able to gain the benefits of sustainable development, sustainable use of computing and information systems. So that such organizations, first of all, will actually be able to pick to use maybe older means that are considered to, for the time being economically supportive to their business activities without minding the harm that they are causing to the environment. And therefore, to eliminate, there is a need to phase out this impunity in the utilization of natural resources or in the exploitation of natural resources, not just in Africa, but globally. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you very, very much indeed. And I think you've touched on something there in a very calm way, which is the massive amount of electronic materials that are dumped in Africa under the label gift. Yeah, under the label, oh, we're giving this to some people in Africa so they can have computers. When if you look at some of these machines coming in, they're like from, 2,000 million years ago. They're so old. often they don't work very well. They're almost dumped before they even arrive in the country. And this has to stop. There has to be some clear signal from the international community that if people are going to give computers to people in Africa, these have to be high quality computers that are not going to be dumped the moment they arrive on the shores of, Mombasa port. The other thing I think you raise is the issue of, even at the end of their life when they've been useful, what happens to them? And Dandora dump in Nairobi, yeah? We know the young people picking waste off the top of these tips with electronic components and other things on fire and the smoke. So what is the answer to this, Kevin? How do we deal with it? What's your idea?
Thank you. I think, as you have mentioned, the challenge of dumping electronic waste in Africa has actually been compounded by the demand for more electronics as the population in Africa grows. But the biggest challenge that we have in Africa is that in most cases, we can't actually be able to afford new computer systems, that is, and that becomes a challenge. But what happens, as much as probably most of these countries or most of these donors may mean well, you realize there's a big challenge because our recycling system, our electronic recycling system are not well established enough. How do we dump these systems? That is, in most cases, actually, I think if most of the shops are to be opened, bundles and bundles of electronic wastes remain. If it comes to repairing the same, it's still a challenge because, for example, I have a microwave that I can actually get repaired, but getting a spare part for the same, I can't be able to get it from any local shops or from any local, because most probably, if it is especially a second-hand thing, there's no such model that exists. So I think there needs to be a global establishment, global regulations, as you have mentioned, on what actually qualifies to be a donation. So that these companies, or at least these companies, are forced to actually have a return back so that when this product is no longer necessary, it's not as grown, is obsolete, it can actually be taken back to this company and they can actually be able to repair it or maybe extract whatever components that they have that the machine still has that are usable and reuse them in building other related components and such.
Exactly. It's either the stuff has to be guaranteed that it will be taken back at the end of its life, or there has to be investment by the government of Kenya with support from the donors in a high quality recycling system where the workers are trained and paid properly with protective gear, and that you create a proper recycling society in Kenya, in other African countries, that becomes an economic benefit, not an environmental liability. Yeah?
Well said. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the Nairobi Hub. I think we have to move on now. Let me bring to the stage Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time again. And yeah, do you want to talk about app activity?
Yes, we have a lot of app
Let's
activity. And first I will actually talk about a warning. Today here at COP we have seen more pledges. I'm not super fond of pledges, but they're of course better than nothing. I'm fond of action. But I do like when pledges are all about money. Mm-hmm. Because if you pledge to pay someone, you need to do it. It's something concrete here and now. But I will, even though I would like to give a warning, because what we're doing is kind of fooling ourselves. I'm talking about the pledges where some countries pledge today to give 400 million to the countries that are affected the most of the climate crisis.
Right.
$400 million. I mean, $400 million. It's how many seconds?
Let's have a look.
It's
somewhere in there, isn't it?
It's maybe 10 minutes or something. I don't know. 20 minutes.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. So this pledge, it's about they are.
It's ridiculous.
It's getting cancelled in 10 or 20 minutes. as long as the same governments doing all those pledges are continuing to sponsor the destruction of this planet. This madness must end. The emperor is naked as long as that counter is counting up.
Yep.
And some people don't like that we have been talking about those subsidies the whole week, but we will continue to talk about this to people wake up and demand change in the world, and they will.
Yep.
And it has kickstarted a conversation here in COP in Glasgow, and I'm so glad that almost everyone are speaking to it. Either if they're a minister or if they're a CEO of a company, people want this to end. So that is my warning.
Absolutely right. Everybody we've talked to says it's absolutely a travesty.
Yes. I have also
want
to highlight a quite clever idea.
Okay.
And I really don't want them to execute it as long as we are here. It's a really brilliant idea created in the platform where they want us leaders, the people, the delegates here at COP, feel the heat. So it's all about turning up the heat here in the Glasgow to global warming level and stop serving food and have water scarcity. So the leaders in the conference room will feel the heat when they need to decide what's needed to be done.
So
and I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But the food, they don't need to do anything with, because we haven't eaten for a week. It's really hard to get the food here. It is food, but the restaurants are closing. It's very long queues, etc. So the food they don't need to improve, but they could turn up the heat maybe.
And then people would know what it feels like to be in a very, very climate-stressed country.
Yeah, because many people are feeling the heat.
The temperatures,
they're feeling the extreme weather. I mean, my own neighborhood, Stockholm, this summer, 200 houses was flooded 2 times.
Right.
2 times.
Yeah.
And I mean, Stockholm is not most affected. There's so many countries that are affected so much more. So,
yes.
I mean, come on, wake up.
Exactly. Ingmar, thanks a lot for your thoughts. That's very helpful. And we come to the end of the circular electronics, the challenge, supply chains and procurement part. And now we're going to look at transforming corporations. Great. We're now going to the section called Transforming Corporations. Big corporations need to transform. And let's hear from some of the transformers, starting with a keynote from 2 people speaking together, which is a bit unusual for us here, both from the Stockholm hub. Let me first introduce Martin Backman, who's CEO of Foxway. Martin is an experienced CEO passionate about strong business development with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and service industry. Foxway's vision is to make digital life easy. They strive to be the top leading company in Europe for sustainable IT services and recycling. Now, sharing this joint keynote, I don't know if they're going to do one word after the other, or it's going to be sentence by sentence and then paragraph to one goes back to the other. We're going to find out. It's going to be really exciting. Joining Martin is Ove Lidström, who's head of business development and innovation. Oh, also at Foxway, so you know each other. Okay. Ove is responsible for the development of the new innovative offers for the Nordic market. Ove has solid experience in leading IT roles and telecom industry. Most recently, he comes from Apple, where he has been sales manager for many years and thus an important part of the Swedish organization's success. Well, look, Ove and Martin, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Super happy to be here. And you really inspired us by the introduction there and see how we play words between each other. But so Martin Backman is my name. We'll introduce Foxway. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Foxway. Foxway is a company focus on circularity within IT devices. I mean, mobiles, computers, laptops, etc. Things that we almost can't live without today. And all these gadgets are also causing a lot of challenges in the society. And I think we have heard so much smart and wise topics today and the week previously. And I think, I mean, when it comes to the IT industry, the emissions are equivalent with the global aviation. So what we do with all these devices actually makes a difference. And what can we do then? I mean, to bring all this down, and I like when Ingmar said it's not about pledges all the way, it's also about actions and changing behaviors. And we see basically the sustainability within our industry lays on 3 pillars. One being, maximizing lifetime of IT products, making sure that product can be used for a very, very long time. I will come into that a little bit later. And it's about, collecting products. It's about sharing products, and we see the trend of not owning anymore, making sure that, when you use it as long as you need it, and then you make sure that someone else could use it. And then also about, giving access to people, sorting out the digital inequality. And we talked about, I heard some about from Nairobi, also about, the importance of keeping track of devices, making sure they are properly refurbished, and also find the incentive of getting these products back, etc. So it's a lot of, different areas, but it's all about the circularity of IT products. When it comes to these pillars, I think one thing that we will see very much about lately and in the future, it's about that it should be verified and measurable. And I mean, we all know, especially me running a company, how important the financial accounting is and the standards that we follow in order to compare, to make sure we can put the stamp and all thing on the quality of that data. And we see that this will be similar on the sustainability accounting. So I think that's very important to already now, when you take actions, when you do things and do investment, that is also part of the thinking moving forward. And we see how companies quite quickly now are preparing themselves to manage all these data, to making sure that you're not only compliant, but also create insights. When it comes to, I mean, one thing we talked about, maximum lifetime, that's basically 2 things in that. One being, and as we talked about in the studio in Stockholm also, to giving knowledge and data about making the right choice of the products that has a longer lifetime. And obviously, this is important of 2 things. One being for companies, of course, to having less emission, less footprint, by making sure that the usage of the products are as long as possible, not producing new ones. And then we're back to the incentives of, what are the incentives of producer, etc. And that's a very important part as well. The other aspect, if you consume a product that lasts long, but for some time, then also there is a cost driver of that. And there is initiative and incentive for companies and users to actually also leverage on the cost savings in this. So I think these 2 measurements and these 2 drivers are very important in the market. And that's also why we see a lot of companies and organizations not only buying products in the traditional ways, but also moving into as a service module. When it comes to Foxway, to give a little bit what can we do, we are obviously a company very reliant on that the whole ecosystem comes together. And basically, I think I've been in the industry for 25 years, and we've talked about sustainability for quite some time. What I see now is that we are now in a position together in the market that we can actually make changes. We have vendors that are, really keen on producing things and taking care of having long lives materials, etc. We see how customers, large end users and telecom operators and people like ourselves as individuals are also focusing a lot on, the behavior. We don't want to consume more than we need to. And I think that's altogether makes it possible for us in the industry now to make a really, really big change that we couldn't done before. So I think, looking forward 5 years, I think we will accomplish extremely much if we can continue this path and building in sustainability in the different business models. So for Foxway, at least, we have, divided this into 2 areas. One being the thing we can do ourselves together with our customers that are also moving into this area. The other thing is, by like we're here today, trying to share good practice, etc., also to influence the market with standard measurable data, insights, enable repair. We talked about it quite a lot during the days, etc., to extend the life cycle of IT products. So I think that's something we can impact and influence each other and making sure it's connected in a good way. And this is basically done by, as we see it, by 2 things, and having support system-wise and compliance and also security. And one being, not having the old behavior of buying things, having them laying around, but instead of consuming this as a service. And one of the great benefits of that, except for the costs side of it, is of course that equipment comes back. And then we move on to the other area, meaning that for a company in our industry, it's about making sure that these devices could be used for a longer period. And that's not, it's easy said, but it's also about a lot of hands-on activity, making sure that we can, exchange some parts of the devices, really making sure that the user experience is still there after 3, 5, 10 years. And that means that you have to invest in some things to establish that. So when it comes to all this area, I think we have a lot of the basis now, and in order to scale this and accelerate, looking in this 3 or 5 years ahead, then it also demands a lot of innovation. And by that I want to leave over to you, Ove.
Actually, with just seconds left, I'll try to be very brief, but it's about 3 things where we are putting some focus in at the moment. So first thing is awareness. So we're making sure that all our customers are being giving data, dashboards, reports, etc., so they can really understand what is the impact of their current behavior. And that is being like step number 1. Step number 2 is that we are investing in artificial intelligence and engines and developing technology that can predict not only the value, the future value of a product, but the actual lifetime. And we're taking all the data sources that we have available of the millions of products that is coming into Foxway every year, and of course taking the intelligence from that. But we also now are adding other data sources on top of that, and all that in one and same system that really can make predictions of the future and the lifetime of a product, which goes then into really really accurate and new ways of doing the climate accounting. And then the third thing, and this is the more of the behavioral stuff that Washington was talking about just like half an hour ago, but we really want to make the corporate buyers, so the end users that are selecting which products they should be using, that they have front and center in the same kind of level as they have normally just price, the monthly cost or the total cost for buying the product. They have the CO2 impact, for example. So these are like just 3 examples of innovation that is going on at Foxway at the moment and that we think can make a lot of impact. So I think that is it. And the questions that will be, I think, for Martin to handle in the panel discussion that will happen in just a few minutes from now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, all.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Foxway. You know, I think I love the idea of Foxway being hired by the European Union so that any computer ever shipped to Africa is fully checked out by Foxway and fully refurbished so that it actually has a good long life in Africa rather than just ending up in a rubbish tip when it arrives at the port of Mombasa. Thank you so much indeed. We are indeed going to a panel now. And let me introduce, Sir Martin Stablers, let me introduce the other speakers on the panel. We've got Anders de Leon, who's CEO of HyperloopTT. He's known globally for his focused management style and creation of growth-orientated businesses within the infrastructure, construction and alternative energy sectors. Anders de Leon was appointed to the role of Chief Executive Officer in 2019, brings 30 years of international experience as an executive in manufacturing and finance management, private-public business negotiations, many other things. Anders worked in the financial department and became Deputy Financial Director of Terratest Construction in Spain. So he's been around. Our next panelist is Andrew Murray, who's Senior Environment Manager, Sustainable Business at Vodafone Group. Andrew Murray manages the development and delivery of the Planet pillar of Vodafone's purpose strategy, focusing on climate innovation, environment and circularity. Yeah, very much. I mean, Vodafone's global transformational goals, they have a science-based target, 2040 net zero, carbon accounting, circular economy approach, and so on and so forth, many things. So let's get the questions going. So, what do you think are the major obstacles in order to create circularity in electronics? Maybe I'll ask that question of Andrew and of Martin. What are the major obstacles to create circularity in electronics? Who would like to take that? Andrew or Martin?
I can start off at least. But I think, I mean, the good thing is we see a change in behavior. We see that a lot of companies and people want to change. There's a much bigger awareness. That being said, we are in an industry that has been around for many years, which has that a lot of our systems and our way of working is, traditional. The way of we talk about procurement is also a bit traditional. How do you procure as a service? What are the measurements that you need to go for? So I think that change is super important that we can build in, because build in the whole ecosystem from vendors to partners and customers. So I think that's a challenge today. I see a lot of our customers really wanted to move in this direction, but it's our joint mission to create the tools around that.
Right.
So that's one area. As I see, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Andrew, do you want to have some reflections on that?
Yes, I think the biggest challenge is just the scale of the industry. It is a truly global industry with design and innovation in one country, manufacturing in another, and a constant rate and churn of development. The acceleration of new technology is unstoppable, and it's something which provides a huge service to society, so you don't want to stop it, but at the same time, designing in that innovation and that circularity at the start is very difficult, because a lot of the business models are built upon building new, building quicker, better, faster. Think of your phone. There's a new one out every year, and increasingly they're not as iteratively better, but there's still a demand for them to improve. So the economics are levered towards producing newer equipment rather than keeping that equipment in use for a long time, because the cost and the benefit is at the sale point.
Exactly. It's fact, when you think about the marketing of mobile phones, creating this huge sort of interest about the latest gadget coming and people queuing round the corner in New York and other places for this new phone. And you sometimes wonder, oh my God, is this consumerism gone mad? But anyway, that's maybe another thought that somebody else could answer. Let me turn to Anders here, because sustainability is clearly the focus of your company. what does Hyperloop do to generate as much resources as possible and make Hyperloop more circular? And maybe you could just say, Anders, before you answer that question, what is Hyperloop?
Okay, good. Well, Hyperloop is defined like the fifth mode of transportation. We have been working in this technology. Basically, it's like imagine going in an airplane, but on the ground. No, we basically put a tube around our capsule. We create a low pressure environment, and we move the capsule with propulsion and electromagnetic propulsion and with passive magnetic levitation. Our company from the beginning was very, very focused on creating a system that, in addition to be efficient, has to be sustainable. No? We wanted to be carbon neutral in terms of emissions in operations, and we have been working on that. And in all the studies that we have done, we generate more energy that we consume because we have developed this specific technology of passive magnetic levitation that you don't need to electrify the track, that has a very low consumption. And in addition to that, because these are big infrastructure projects, linear projects, we put solar panels on top and we generate renewable energy, normally between 5 to 15% of more energy that we consume. But of course, sustainability is not only that. No, sustainability is also trying to develop an infrastructure that adapts to the terrain and adapts to the people and how they do we live, in the 21st century. And sustainability is about circularity, no? And it's about what kind of materials are you going to be using, how are you thinking, and how are you designing every single element of the whole transportation system, thinking in circularity. And that has been our goal, and that's where we have been working from the beginning. We believe that Hyperloop also can help in the value chain, in the supply chain, because at the end of the day, we are talking about a system that again is emissions free, in its operations. So we could change drastically the way that we move materials from one place to the other. My colleagues were talking about an industry that is global, and you manufacture in one place, you sell in other, and we can really, really help to reduce the footprint of that logistics.
So, Anders, just get this right. This is about transporting goods, is it?
It's about transporting goods and transporting passengers.
Okay.
We are working in parallel on both. We have 3 programs, and we are working in parallel because we think that is equally important, for our mission, to move passengers and to move freight.
Will they be able to use their mobile phones and computers in this Hyperloop?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good, because I was trying to find a connection between you and these other guys, right? Sometimes that's the hardest thing for a moderator, right? Because it's fascinating what you're talking about. I suppose digitally we shift ideas and we do procurement and buy all kinds of things on computers and etc. But you're talking about another form of communication and distribution altogether, but it has electronics in it. So I suppose this is where the circularity comes in. Whoa, this is a tough one to interconnect, but it's fascinating. Okay. But you will be able to use all your gadgets in this system.
Yeah, definitely. In any infrastructure in today's world, it's considered what is called a smart infrastructure. No, you have a lot of IoT, a lot of gadgets, a lot of things. You measure every single element of the infrastructure of the rolling stock that you have, the capsules, the tubes, So yeah, of course, we use a lot, and we are very, very focused on choosing the right partners that has the idea of sustainability and circularity in mind.
Got you, yeah. But at the end of a Hyperloop's life, it will be an end-of-life Hyperloop. So it will have to be looped back into the economy, just like computers and mobile phones and all the digital networks when they come to the end of their lives. We need to make them circular. So let me ask you a question to all 3 about this circular economy and circular electronics. I get a sense from listening to the earlier speakers, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're still a little bit at the infancy in terms of the regulations, the incentives, all the other infrastructure that maybe governments can put in or trade associations could put in through self-regulation to actually bring all these materials genuinely back into circularity, not just in rich countries, but maybe also especially in developing countries. What would you be looking for over the coming 5, 10, 15, 20 years in terms of how you see the regulatory or the guidelines or the trade association rules of the products and services that you provide? Anybody want to take that? Andrew.
I can start if you'd like. A very broad question. I think for us, we have a greater circular model already where we have direct control. So our network, our routers and things where Vodafone ultimately owns them, we can manage that better. The bigger challenge is where things pass through us. So those mobile phones, we don't manufacture them, we don't make them, we don't own them. They sit in your drawer at home. And there's no cost to you. There's no harm of a small mobile phone sitting, wasting away in a drawer until it ends up in a bin or a landfill or a dump and causes harm. So there really needs to be a much stronger onus on extended producer responsibility, on financially incentivizing the collection, the return, the reuse, the repair, the refurbishment of these goods to keep them in a loop. Whereas at the moment, that's quite limited, which means there's no cost to incentivize those returned goods. And I think if we started to align across that globally, we could connect all these elements in such a large ecosystem and start bringing things back because the financials would make sense.
Right. I think, Martin, you've got some ideas here because you're actually looking at the dematerialization in the sense that you can also not own something anymore. You can just rent it. And that's a different business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Anders is in on it a bit about, if you don't have, the financial aspect of owning things, then you're really contributing in the circularity. So in a way, I think the incentives for a user is to have the flexibility of using product as long as it makes sense. And then collaboratively making sure that product could be used again. And it's easier said than done because, in ideal world, you have control and you monitor these products. And the technique today is so advanced, so you can actually do it, but you need to invest in the system supporting this. Instead of, it's getting some ghost devices that no one knows where they are. So I think for the industry, and we talked about, regulations, I see how some countries are regulating that. In France, you are, 20% of the public tender should be reused, etc. And that's, of course, a thing, they want to push that market a bit. And I think that's fine, that's good in a way. But it's also, I think it's even stronger if you can make, monetary-wise, it's worth not owning products. And I think for companies moving into that direction and also for individuals, I think that makes sense. And then we will, we will solve this in a way that it's actually a win-win situation. Yes. So I think, system data, knowledge and system support, but also, like Anders said, the financial solutions around these should be tied together.
Anders, who owns Hyperloop? It's a private company, but it almost sounds like an infrastructure that even governments might want to be part of too. So what does the future hold in terms of circularity with, are we going to have Hyperloops connecting all countries, all parts of the world? It potentially sounds like a vast infrastructure that would be rolled out.
Well, HyperloopTT is owned by the founders, of the company, but also by a big amount of people around the world. We have more than 800 contributors around the world and more than 50 companies collaborating, working in exchange of equity of the project. We have been defined by Harvard Business School like the biggest crowdsourcing platform in the world. So we don't want to own the infrastructure. We are a network orchestrator. We are a technology licensor. And the same way that we have developed the technology together with our technological partners, we will be licensing the technology to the big infrastructure operators and to the big transportation operators. That's how Hyperloop works. I would like to say something, about, because for me, I understand that the consumer electronics, especially, is an industry that fashion is very, very important. But I think that my colleague has put the point in the most important thing. We are seeing in other industries, this revolution of mobility as a service, insurance as a service, everything as a service. I think that if we can arrive to electronics as a service, that would be a great, great opportunity for really adding a lot of cycles, to the circularity of the products,
Okay.
And I think that is about consumer behavior, and also the responsibility of the big companies in the electronics trying to encourage that kind of behavior in the consumers.
Yes. Guys, I hope you can just stay on just for a few more minutes because I'm going to turn to our hubs, which we have. First, I'd like to ask Nairobi in Kenya, whether you're still on the line, whether you have a question for any of these speakers here. Nairobi, any questions for the speakers here?
Hi, Nick. Yes, we're still on board. I had two ladies who are with me that I wanted to make questions or comments to the panelists. So I'll be asking Elsa to join. Elsa can come in quickly, make your comment.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Yeah.
And my name is Elsa Wangeshi, and I'm a communications person. So I think mine is more of a, what do I say? Mine is more of a comment, not a question.
Okay.
And as a woman, I feel so honored to be part of this conversation, because especially when you look about matters to do with climate, women tend to take a backseat, but we are glad we are being involved in these matters. And I would like to call upon every woman out there. Every woman has maternal instincts. It might not be to sit in conference places and make these decisions, but the same way you take care of your home, you can still do something to change the planet, to make it a better place. Start making your home a better place. I make my home a better place. You do the same thing to your place, and I think the world is going to be a better place. It's the smallest of things we do. Thank you, Nick.
Yes, thank you. Yes, for a good gender perspective. And do we have a question now from on the electronic side?
Yes, so the question on the electronic side was in regard to extension of the responsibility to the producers and thinking of transforming corporations. What direction, especially for the big producers of electronics, what conversations are there in terms of ensuring that the product, and I'm looking at phones and computers with these unique charging systems that come that makes them obsolete within a very short period. What sort of
okay, the issue of obsolescence. This is an interesting developing country question, but also a developed country question too. The issue of obsolescence. How do we deal with that? Because it's almost a little bit out of date, but it's come back with electronics. Can anybody address that question? Martin, I think you've disappeared, but Andrew?
Yeah, I can take that if you'd like. I think there's a mix of voluntary and regulation here. If you kind of look at the history and what's happened recently. So we in Vodafone got together with 4 of the other large European telcos, and we created what's called eco rating. So we've assessed and analyzed mobile phones on their sustainability performance. And that includes topics such as how long they have software updates for, how repairable they are, how much recycled goods they are. Both so we can give that information to our consumers, but also so we can challenge the manufacturers and say, you're scoring worse than the average in these areas. We believe you should work harder and improve those areas. And they really like that. They really want to know where they're behind and what they can do to make a more sustainable device.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work, you see it with the EU and the standardization of chargers. The voluntary system was set up, and over a number of years, it wasn't adopted by all of the manufacturers. The challenge is how do you stop and encourage innovation and don't limit innovation while still standardizing towards a lower waste world? And in the end, the regulation came in then. Now, whether that's right or wrong is beyond my level of technical knowledge, but there's a balance to be had between voluntary regulation, but also considering the knock-on effects around innovation and development.
All right, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly now go to Stockholm. Stockholm, any questions from your end?
Yeah, Christina here. I have a last question. It's actually, I want everything as a service, both the washing machine we talked about earlier and the phones.
And the Hyperloop. And the Hyperloop.
And the Hyperloop, yes. Everything as a service. But that will change the business model for example, Vodafone, so you don't push these telephones on us all the time.
Yeah.
Could you make money on only services?
Yes, that is the question. The first thing that we need to really look for is the consumer demand. Currently, I think it is, from what we understand and our surveys, a step too far for consumers. They understand leasing for cars, things like this, but on mobile phones, less so. The corporate customers now understand it because it does offer a lower cost, which is a great thing. And that security of always being able to replace, repair if there was a damage, and then return it back to Vodafone, and we'll work with a partner to ensure it's got third, fourth lives. The business model is always there to be broken, and if big corporates don't innovate, they'll get taken over by a new startup who will innovate underneath them. So I think the push will be there, and it's that balance between striking at the right time. But yes, everything as a service, I think, solves a lot of problems. Probably create some new ones, but that's what disruption and innovation's for.
Good. Now I'm going to go over to Washington, D.C., to Shweta. Any questions there, Shweta? And maybe Martin and Anders could jump in on these.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Very fascinating panel. Thank you to the panelists. Well, part of the Build Back Better agenda that we're seeing make its way through Congress right now here in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill is ensuring that equitability is built into access for US populations. And we just heard from Kenya, we're not even talking about a developing country. We have equitability issues here in the United States, access to all of the technologies and electronics that we've been talking about. How do you think through making access and availability more equitable all around? Thank you.
Martin.
It's an excellent question. I think, topic of, we talked about as a service, but I truly believe in, putting, knowledge and data about, consuming products that really can last for a long time. And if we look at the examples on, if you buy this nowadays as a service with full data, then you only pay for the consumption, what you do, and the period you have it. And that makes, the cost of using high quality products much, much lower in the last end of the cycles. So I think, looking at, and it doesn't have to be Nairobi, I agree, it could be, students, or it could be other groups that would love, all these fantastic techniques that are in these, but might not could afford or have the opportunity to buy the latest and greatest model. But it's still, I think, it's not like it was 20 years ago that products that are 5 or 10 years old are totally useless. Today I think the producer are doing quite a good job in actually building product that lasts a long time, provided that the system and the repairs, like you talked about, also is come along that time period.
What about Anders Hyperloop? Is it going to be for the very rich, being hyperlooped around the place?
No, definitely no. We are talking about a mass transportation system. In the last study that we did in Great Lakes, in our feasibility study to connect Cleveland and Chicago to Pittsburgh, the system is financially viable with tickets that are around 75% of the actual cost of any other mode of transport in the same routes. We are not trying to create a system just for rich people. Hyperloop try to democratize transportation, and we have been working very hard to be sure, that it's a system that will be, equally possible to use by everybody.
That sounds rather exciting.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
guys, we're running out of time. I want to say, Shweta, thank you so much for coming in from DC. Thank you to our guests that have come in on the magic of Zoom as well. And we'll now move on to our next section with a pre-recorded interview with Mats Pellbäck Scharp, who's head of sustainability at Ericsson. So Mats, give us your perspective on circular electronics.
I think often you have to take a life cycle perspective when we talk about circular electronics. Often you only think that prolonging the life is the best way to go, but if you don't understand where you have your impacts over the life cycle, you might end up in the wrong hole. Because if you have like a smartphone, 90% of the emissions of a smartphone comes in the production of the phone, in the camera, in the chipset and in the display. But if you, for instance, take a mobile network that Ericsson supplies, we have 90% of the impact during the use of the products. And then it might be so that it's better to take a product with a high energy consumption out of life and recycle it for materials than trying to reuse it for a longer period of time. So I think you have to have a full perspective and approach when we think about the life cycle.
In electronic products and gadgets, there's all kinds of goodies that we need for our economy. It's important to bring those back. What's in a digital product?
Well, in most of electronics, you almost have the full periodic system. But it's in different parts. So for instance, in the chassis of a product, often you have aluminum and steel, and those are easily dismantled and then can be reused very, very efficiently. And the other parts are in the electronics, in the printed circuit board of the product. And there you have gold, copper, palladium, and some other metals. And if you have a good recycling process, you get a very high degree of materials out. I mean, Ericsson, we have done recycling of electronics since 2001. And we collect products globally, and we have a 98% reuse grade of the total product from weight perspective.
So Mats, is this field of circular electronics moving fast enough? I mean, as a company, Ericsson, digitalization, you're decarbonizing your infrastructure very rapidly. What about the products themselves that connect with this infrastructure? Are we moving fast enough with this circular electronics story?
No, I don't think so. I think the best thing that you can do to reduce your digital footprint is to prolong the life of your product. So 1 more year of a mobile phone or a smartphone will really reduce the total impact, as we have such a big part in the production phase. And even giving it back for reuse is often very good. So in that we are not doing enough to reuse material. But from an Ericsson perspective, I think the highest grade of reuse is really just the software upgrade. So all products that we launched on the latest platform since 2015 are upgradable to 5G, and 5G wasn't launched until 3 to 4 years later. So all products that we sold, you can just upgrade with the software, and of course that's the highest degree of reuse in a way. Just the software upgrade and you're on the latest technology level.
Super. That's great. So that was Mats Pellbäck Scharp of Ericsson. Super. So let me again call on Ingmar Rentzhog, the founder and CEO of We Don't Have Time, to come and join us on stage. What about this segment? What is the app activity connected here?
One love I saw open app was to Microsoft.
Aha.
Because Microsoft, they have won the UN Climate Action Award. I think it was today or yesterday.
Could well be today, yeah.
And they have won it because they have pledged to go carbon neutral by 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And they also pledged to remove all the carbon since they started the company, that the company has caused until 2050.
Wow, so going all the way back.
So it's a great pledge.
Yeah.
But when again, pledges needs to be transformed into action.
Mm-hmm.
I think Microsoft will do their best to put action behind it, but if it doesn't cost anything to make a pledge, you can make all kinds of pledges, and your business will bloom. You will win fine prizes, and who will be the CEO of Microsoft 5 years from now, or I mean, we were talking 2050, we're talking 30 years from now. It's like, I don't know. We need to have accountability, and I'm a finance guy in my previous background. So I talked to one of our people in the audience, and she had a great idea. So this is not mine idea. It's not posted in the app yet. I hope she will do it. She's not here, unfortunately, but this idea is kind of brilliant. What if companies and countries doing all those pledges need to put up the money behind it? So if they don't succeed with the pledges, to deliver on the pledges, they need to pay like $153 billion or something.
Right.
I think it's totally sane. What if all those leaders here, making all those pledges here, need to put the money behind the pledges if they fail the pledges? We will see a whole different story. We will see everyone not making pledges they will not deliver on, but if they make the pledges, they will deliver on it. So that could be the winner of the climate reward ID on We Don't Have Time next year. We will give the prize on Thursday for the best climate reviews on the platform this year.
What a very interesting idea. So this marks the end of this segment, and so we now move on to solutions.
Hello. It is now my pleasure to introduce Sacha Ghiglione back to give a keynote. Prime Computer. You have the floor.
Thank you. Did you know that the IT industry already today uses 10% of the global energy, and that the amount of e-waste that isn't recycled contributes to 4.25% of greenhouse gas emissions? Welcome everybody, my name is Sacha Ghiglione and I'm the CEO of Prime Computer. We live in a time where there's a lot of opportunities and hope for us, but also immense challenges we face. But with great technology comes great responsibility. I have several cultures within me and had the great opportunity to live and work in 7 countries and even explore way more. One thing that I've always seen in the world, in different cultures, in the people, is a constant change. While I lived in New York City, the city that never sleeps, almost 13 years ago, I had encountered so many cultures, diversity, religions, and one crowded area. I was stunned by the kindness and openness I received on a daily basis. We are all on a journey. And my journey led me to be on a continuous search, a search for positivity and communication, but also the passion of doing the right thing. We have seen so many changes within the last 2 years. My passion is for everyone. Yes, everyone, you are part of the change. And actually, let us see this change and use it for the greater good. I believe it is underestimated how much contribution actually the ICT industry has to both the global impact on change and the contribution of reducing e-waste and CO2 emissions. E-waste is actually the fastest growing waste stream with about 53 million metric tons. That's about the weight of 350 cruise ships. And without more global action, experts actually predict that in 2030, the world will generate more than 74 million metric tons of e-waste every year. That's massive. A partner of ours recently shared with me the tremendous story and pictures of his visit in those landfills. And I must say, I was deeply shocked. Seeing those children, boys and girls gathering around and our waste, it has not only incredible economical and ecological influence on us, but massive health risks for everyone involved. While the linear economy, as we heard earlier, has generated substantial economic growth and material wealth since actually the Industrial Revolution, the underlying model is flawed. It's unsustainable and will ultimately be collapsed in the near future. We need to quit the take, make, waste behavior, which we have been fed for so long. Well, I still remember the times when something broke. Who hadn't had this cassette deck that broken once or twice, or even, taking a pan and rolling up the cassette and injecting it back in? We were engaged to repair it. We were engaged to fix it. We were engaged to use it longer and to give it another life. Transitioning to a circular economy is vital if you wish to reverse the adverse impacts of the prevailing system that actually continue to have on our planet, on our health, and on the future. Shifting from linear to a circular requires systemic shifts and new solutions. No stone can be left unturned in the pursuit of sustainability and circularity. There's a world of opportunity to rethink and redesign the way we produce and consume. The rethinking progress actually explores how, through a change in perspective, we can redesign the way our economy works by designing products that can be made again, and powering the system with renewable energy, kept as long as possible in the system. At Prime Computer, we are designing for dematerialization, longevity, reuse, and recyclability, and actually adopting specifications for sustainable materials and components, actually, which can provide great opportunities to optimize value generation at each stage of a product's life cycle. It confirms that with creativity and innovation, we can rebuild a restorative economy. Look, we source from local suppliers. We set ourselves high targets for remanufacturing or resource recovery. That actually mean to use our waste as a resource. We develop tools for customers that calculate the energy and CO2 savings. And we offer easy upgrade and modular solutions, as well as, yes, we talked about that earlier, a product as a service model. Our product use up to 80% less energy, and they all come with a 5-year warranty. And you know what? Because we build for quality and longevity. There are great companies also here today, like Foxway, which give a second or even third life to products. And especially great solutions on the reverse logistics, like N2S or closing the loop. Given the global and complex nature of electronic supply chain, a coalition of the willing is needed across all companies, value chain steps, and sectors to establish the circular economy. And the players that act early can ultimately be better positioned in tomorrow's circular markets. One thing is sure though, it needs to be anchored with the company's culture itself. You see that in the core, a sustainability culture where every stakeholder is driven by the purpose of positive, sustainable change. For instance, here at Prime Computer, we are aligning people bonuses on sustainable goals. Our vision is to accelerate a global transition towards a circular future for both work, but also life. Our ambition is to create a global manufacturing ecosystem and a circular electronics manufacturing standard without any compromise. In 2021, Prime Computer became the first 100% climate neutral IT hardware vendor in Europe. And we aim to achieve climate positivity in 2022. We show it's possible already today and not needing any pledges for 2030 or in 29 years. We need to act now. Furthermore, we are embracing a manufacturing of tomorrow approach, which encompasses a connected digitally ecosystem organized around a platform. And ultimately, we enhance knowledge, becoming a thought leader for circular electronics, accelerating the needed shift in our industry. Everybody is in a change process. Make sure it's fair, make sure it's truly sustainable, and not just any damn brand that sells you the marketing green label. We do not have endless resources, and we do not have time. And neither should we, as circularity benefits all stakeholders, the nature, the economy, and you. The innovation and the will cannot come from just us. It's all of us. And it's in your hands as well. So do the right thing. Be passionate about that. And be passionate about the positive change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Back to Glasgow.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sacha, for sharing your passion and also pointing out that we're all stakeholders in this. And also to pointing out that it is possible to be a leader, and that there is an advantage in being first in changing processes and procedures. You'll be back shortly for a panel, but first I'm going to turn to the next keynote speaker. It's Joost de Kluijver. He is founder and CEO at Closing the Loop that you just mentioned. Joost's company developed waste compensation. It is a service focused on tech hardware that won the Dutch Circular Award. He works with the technology sector and their customers on turning circular ambitions into engaging results. So I see you're already with us, Joost. Excellent. So you have the floor. Right now we cannot hear you, Joost. So see if we can get you connected audially too.
Yeah, sure.
There you are. Excellent.
Good. All
yes,
right.
you have the floor.
I was all making all kinds of compliments about you, so I'll do that again.
Excellent.
Thanks so much for the organizers for inviting me, and of course, really happy to hear all those great speakers so far. My name is Joost de Kluijver, representing a company called Closing the Loop. Happy to also be part of the topic of solutions, although I must say that if we had a solution, I would be making a lot more money. We're just offering a starting point towards circularity, plus clearly it is a highly complex topic to really deliver on, circularity for tech, that is. So before I explain a little bit what we do, and again, thanks for the introduction there, allow me to set a little bit of the context of why we're doing what we're currently offering to our customers. We're active on circular tech now for some 10 years, and I think the few lessons that we've learned are to be summarized in probably 3 bullets. First of all, I think the element that we're not seeing often enough is a focus on value. There is such an opportunity to offer circular electronics to customers and make that concept, that proposition valuable for a customer. Of course, also for society, but let's just focus on the customer perspective for now. We're seeing that a organization, and clearly we're serving many across the globe already, if a organization uses tech, and I'm quite sure that's the majority of the companies out there, and other public firms as well, if those devices are used by every employee and if they're crucial for your organization, and perhaps it also makes sense that those devices are a little bit aligned with your company values. And so circular electronics, circular tech can actually be seen as a customer value, as a proposition that you can offer, that you can sell. So with that, using the market instead of fighting the market. I think also what we saw is that circularity for tech sometimes struggles with the fact that it's highly abstract. It's connected to that topic of sustainability, which is also something that you do not really think about a lot when you buy a phone or a laptop. Climate change or material scarcity are important topics, but they're very disconnected from an individual person buying a device or a procure work for an organization. So that abstract element of the topic of circularity, and perhaps sometimes also the utopian concept of we will in 2050 deliver on all of those great concepts, we will make the world waste-free, or all of those beautiful statements, they are relevant, but they're not actionable. And I think if we are a little bit more humble as service providers for tech, as a tech industry, in recognizing that currently we're not doing a lot, because it's very difficult to work on circularity for tech. But we do, of course, want to act. I think we can be more pragmatic, more realistic. And I think that is an element that we could focus on a little bit more, staying away from beautiful, complex, abstract stories and focusing on what can be done and what is available at the moment. And then thirdly, and this is something that I hear, especially as we work in emerging markets. Again, I'll explain a little bit more what we do there. We should try to perhaps stay away a little bit from the problems, focusing on the negativity, on the issues, but also on the responsibility, I would say, is hardly a driver for change. If we as an industry would like to act on the topic, then I think we also need to recognize that the majority of people working in the tech industry are not compliance people. They're not the CSR professionals. In the tech industry, we see commercial people. And so focusing on customers, on how we can help our customers, I think is a way to act on circularity today. Not by focusing on what's wrong with the industry, because clearly a lot is wrong, but by showing that there's benefits to be gained by making that industry better. So those three topics just as a starting point, a little bit more value focus, less abstract, and a little bit more focus on what does the customer actually want. That allows me to explain what we do. Closing Loop offers a waste compensation service, which very simply, again, offer just a starting point, allows an organization or an individual to buy the devices that they want, for example, a phone or a laptop, but now make that purchase waste neutral. Waste neutral means that you buy, for example, a mobile phone, and when you buy that new device, you collect an equal amount of electronic waste. That is what my company does. We collect electronic waste and recycle that waste. So as we collect and recycle electronic waste, as we reduce waste, that waste reduction can be used to compensate a new device. We make devices waste neutral. A service used by public buyers, for example, that of the national government here in the Netherlands, but also many private organizations, consultants, banks, and others. It's a service that is used also by the tech industry, companies like Samsung or T-Mobile, for example. So what I think we would be promoting is stop using the word should, stop using the concept we need to, and focus on what you can do. And if that is just something small, then recognize that fact, but do it. Learn from implementation, try to act towards circularity, and see what happens if you take a step. But most of all, keep acting as a company, because as a tech industry, what we're really good at is creating beautiful services, beautiful products, and making our customers happy. So let's keep doing that and use circularity or sustainability and deliver on that goal. Instead of saying, yes, we have beautiful products, but actually we should be ashamed of them. We shouldn't be. We should be proud of what we can do as tech companies. We should be proud of collaborating within our supply chain, and together we can create value for our organizations, for our customers, and for society. So with that, just wanted to highlight what Wolfgang mentioned earlier, and also happy to hear Andy from Vodafone mentioning that it's all about customer demand. So make it appealing for your customers, make it understandable, make it actionable, offer them something that they like, that they can use, that's valuable for them. And I think that's something that we can build on then for next steps towards that grand vision of circularity for tech, which I'm hoping we'll be discussing a bit more on as well. So thanks for that, and over to panel or the organizers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Joost, and you'll be staying for the panel. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the next two panelists. With us we have, via Zoom, Andrew Gomarsall. He's Executive Chairman at N2S, and he's also Director of Bisoscope 3. He's a passionate environmentalist and a strong advocate for true net zero. He shares and drives positive actions in the metal sector with technology for a green circular economy. And I'm happy to see that you are with us, Andrew. And I'm also happy to introduce from Stockholm, from our hub in Stockholm, Martin Willers. He's co-founder and CEO of Transparent. And Martin leads the Stockholm-based consumer electronics brand, Transparent. And he leads it with a vision to be the first circular tech brand. And Martin previously co-founded the product design consultancy People. So let's see if we have, yes, we do have Martin with us. Terrific to see you two in this hub in Stockholm. So I'd like to start addressing the panel here. Which are your main obstacles for pushing further ahead in terms of circular electronics? And I'd like to start with you, Martin.
Well, I think Joost put it very concretely in the way that he said it's too abstract. Actually, only 40% of the Danish consumers understand the definition and value of circular economy. So then we're spending all this time in a panel talking about circular electronics, which is a subset of that ambition. Consumer, if you put them in an industrial scale, they have a very hard time envisioning it. And how can you then care about something you can't envision? So we, as producers and brands, we have a great responsibility of making something sensible to the consumer. And I think the first step is quality. If it lasts for a long time, it's the single most important thing we can do to reduce the environmental footprint of electronics. And there's a fatigue of updates. Trust me, people don't want to change mobile phones every third year. They almost have to do it because companies are actually throttling them out. We have to fight this market dynamic and start building things that last longer. The way we're doing it with our speakers is that the wireless part of the speaker is upgradable. So you can actually change the wireless technology as it develops. So we crowdfunded our first product almost 10 years ago. We blogged it, and the internet liked the idea of a modular electronic. So we actually got 500 consumers to fund our first product. And since then, what you put inside of the product to update it has changed several times because we were depending on Apple, we were depending on Google, and we were depending on Amazon to give us these upgrades. So now we've started to make the wireless upgrades ourselves, just so we can control it better and actually promise a longer support of the wireless stuff we put in the market. So what I would say is that we have to understand that we're talking an abstract language. And as a founder of a company, how could you relate to that we as a society consume 100 billion tons? How could you relate to that number? I tried to put a picture in my head, and I was wondering, Eiffel Towers will not be enough. So how heavy is Manhattan? It's 100 million tons, those 38,000 buildings. So it's actually 1,000 times Manhattan that we're consuming every year as society. And how much is circulated? It used to be 9%, now we're down at 8.6%. The rest goes in landfill, oceans, or badly recycled by turning it into heat that goes up in our skies. So that's why it's important for us to start thinking in a circular way, and I think everyone can relate to that fact.
Thank you, Martin. It sounds like you're also talking about how we communicate this is crucial, so people really get to understand the impact of this all. And of course, this vision of how heavy Manhattan is and how many Manhattans we actually consume could be helpful to visualize what we're actually doing in this field. So I'd like to turn now to Andrew. From your perspective, what do you need to push further to get more circularity when it comes to electronics?
And thank you for having me. I'm missing Glasgow, by the way. I was there all last week, so thank you to
probably have better food where you're at now than we do here in the
to all the
pavilion.
Scottish people.
Yes.
I've never had such a warm welcome. It's normally being booed, but the circularity story sort of has to start in so many ways. I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation started with the design, which I think is absolutely fundamental. But I sort of pitched in with design with what material, and that was a key challenge because our recovery rates are so appalling. And one of the biggest challenges I found, which I kind of knew, but I was really shocked about that it actually came out of government, was in the UK, was the biggest challenge is security. And security is a wide-ranging topic, but the main thing was around data and the different individuals in the different departments that have come from different areas of security, and therefore why are consumers hoarding and keeping stuff in drawers is because they're scared. They're scared of releasing their equipment because how do I do this? What do I do? And I've been championing on various platforms, and most consumers would come back and say, help us, what do we do, right? So I think we've got a huge challenge. So we need to recover the stuff that we buy, and then it's what happens next. I was staggered by a documentary on Netflix around minimalization and the fact that we are just human beings that like buying stuff and we want to own stuff. And in the US, apparently, if you added up all the stuff that we purchase, from knives and forks to lamps to tables to technology, the average household owns 300,000 items. It's just staggering.
That's staggering. So Andrew, what do you need in terms of, for instance, policies to make this happen faster, what you're visualizing here?
Well, policy is only as good as the supply chain that can fulfill the service or solution. So it's a rewriting of policy in that, how do we manufacture? Where do we get this stuff from? Where do we get the material from? And the reality at the start of this conversation is that we are 9% circular at the moment. And a lot of companies are really pushing forward, we're a circular, sustainable business, et cetera, but the reality is in the marketplace today in the world, we are 9% circular, which is pretty staggering. If I had lost a game 91-9, I'd be devastated. We've got a long way to go, right? It's pretty brutal. So that's the reality. So policy needs to change to make companies like Sacha and a lot of the companies that have been on here absolutely at the forefront of relevance, because Joost will testify to this, I can testify to it. The decade I've been working in this industry, we have not been relevant at all. And it's policy will help that and change, and it's policy for how you manufacture. And unfortunately, the big giants all manufacture in one area, and that is the challenge. Until Scope 3 emissions becomes mandatory, and that we actually go out and assess, we have no idea. It's all puffery. So I think there's a heck of a long way in terms of the policy. And then at the end of, it's during and then end of life, the narrative has to change. We're still only 9% circular. We need to recover. So governments need to support the return of the product, but also have a platform. And we talked about digitizing a circular economy. That includes the reuse. So, reusing the government's own products. And I think there's just so much more policy to be written. But in the UK, we've made huge progress.
Thank you, Andrew. I've noticed that Martin was signaling, but I'd like to turn to get back a visual of Joost and also Sacha here, because they're also part of this Zoom conversation. And I heard one of you speaking. Excellent. Who was that? That was probably Joost, right?
Yes. I was just actually asking to jump very shortly into,
of course,
the statement of Andrew there, because I think what we're seeing in the in the sustainability or green world to some extent is a bit of well, too much of a hope, if you will, that legislation will fix things. And clearly, in the end, we will need legislation. But until then, we need proper propositions, right? We need to convince people. We need to have something that appeals more than the current proposition, because current propositions indeed are quite linear. So unfortunately, we cannot tell most customers, just pay more money and you will save the planet, because then most customers will say, no. So we need to make it more appealing also for those customers that are not very active on sustainability, and especially in the tech industry, that's a really large group of customers. So yes, working towards legislation, we're working with the governments here as well, is essential, especially in emerging markets where you have zero legislation. There's a lot of work to do. But until then, and that's the next 5, 10, 20 years perhaps, we need companies to create great green propositions.
Thank you, Joost. Sacha, did you want to hop in here and add something?
At this stage, I think I just agree with my predecessors on everything, and we can go to the next question, but I'm fully agree with three of them.
Thank you, Sacha. It made it just easier for me because I'm looking at the clock here. So Martin, back to you.
Okay, so I think there's a new book out called Engineering, which means designing consumption life cycles that ends as well as they begin. And I think that's a book everyone in the panel today should read, because we are not really caring about that end, but what we as a small company, we are a startup with small resources. We're trying to leverage something like the EU digital passport that will come out next year, so we can build on the shoulders of giants, and we can build on standards that make us not greenwash, but actually accessible to consumers. So we worked with the Swedish Innovation Agency the last couple of years, and now we are the first electronic company to have a QR code on the product. So if you scan them, you go to a page where you get the life cycle, you get all the parts, the repair manual, and you can actually later in the stages of the life of the product, see if it was pre-loved, or if you want to recycle it for material, you know all the specifications. And this is something that's about to go into law across EU, but I think it's super encouraging in the context of such a panel that we as a handful of crowd-funded people can be the leaders and the defining company to do this first and show the way to the big companies in the panels like Logitech that might not as clearly point to the direction of the future. So I think that's something Ingmar asked of us, to come with deeply encouraging action. And this is one of the actions we are taking right now. Actually, right now this product is being launched, and it's the first one with such a digital product passport as a prototype. EU will then come with laws and bigger data directives to support this for all companies and all products, but that will of course be phased out over a longer time cycle. So that's something we can do, because I think as a consumer, when we are going to start renting these out, we promise the consumer that we clean them. But to a consumer, you do care a little bit about where a product has been. And if you can be fully transparent with that, I think the trade-off as a consumer is much fairer. And it also enables a lot of circular business models, like I just mentioned. We will start to rent these out in Stockholm now and use this system as a way to track them.
Thank you for bringing this up. This is actually my next question in terms of labels and also standards. How important is this? Sacha, I'm turning now to you, because you are one of the leaders in this transition. How can this facilitate change faster if we have clearer standards and even labeling? This is one way to go about it, of course, that Martin is describing, and it's also up on the EU level. So thank you very much for bringing this up. Sacha.
I think what Martin said was absolutely right. It needs to be about transparency and authentication. So we in our segment have a real hard, not just a problem, but also a good opportunity, because we need to, as a company, be as sustainable as possible in everything we do, and you need to be transparent about that. But we need to have regulations, and that can be a problem coming within in the economy itself, because we're going to have such a weight on, are you really this sustainable? Where does it come from? And such certification processes are maybe not yet designed, and this will come along the way. And I think that N2S or Prime Computer will be one of those contributors that can help the industry designing the circular economy. And I talked in the keynote about that. It's about the ecosystem we're going to create, and one part of that is going to be the legislation and the certification processes that everybody aligns. And I remember Wolfgang saying earlier in this supply chain and procurement topic that it is about digitalization. And the digitalization, there is one thing that we can use of is maybe, and the QR code is one good thing, but maybe we can use an infrastructure, blockchain, to identify where a product has been and where it's going to be, and it's not going to be manipulated, right? Something like that would be ideal, and that creating like a digital encompasses system and a platform where everybody can join in and that everybody has access, so we can be transparent about that.
Thank you, Sacha. Comments from Joost or Andrew, for instance, about this fantastic EU passport that is now underway?
I think consumers probably wanted this 25 years ago, right?
I did.
So yeah, exactly. So it's fair play to Martin for doing this. In the UK, I know that we're going to sit down with government to absolutely bring this forward, but it's a QR code to guarantee that it's going to the right places when it is properly end of life, and that's going to be really, really difficult. The cascades in the reuse cycles are pretty huge, and to track that asset all the way through and make sure it can only be done with a passport. End of story. So well done for starting it off. And it feels crazy that we're in the UK that we're just about to pilot something in this regard.
Thank you, Andrew. Would you like to add, Joost?
Yeah, but I'm afraid I'll stir up a bit of a discussion there. I wouldn't really agree. I think passports and some of the other legislation coming up is really more of a showcase that we're trying to see circularity as a goal. Circularity is a means to an end, and creating extremely complex bureaucratic processes to enable circularity doesn't always help. I think sometimes even it fuels criticism, where people would say, we're just making up a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, we're making it really difficult for businesses and consumers to do what they want. And that is what circularity and sustainability is. And I think we really need to move away from that. I think as long as people consider sustainability as something that limits their choices, as that they see circularity as something that makes their lives complex or makes doing business more expensive, that's not where we want to be.
So, but just how does this passport make things more complicated for the consumers?
This is for business. So for consumers, well, I must say, I need to find the first consumer first that will look at a product passport when they buy a phone, but I'm quite sure there will be a group of customers looking at that information. But unfortunately, to my knowledge, it will be 5 or 10% of customers that will look at a product passport before they buy a device. It's a great concept for the people that are already convinced.
So what would you like to see instead, Joost?
I think we need to act and offer something that appeals to the people that are not very interested in sustainability and circularity. Because offering something that's green and circular for those that are already convinced, I don't really see the benefit. Offering something that for those that are currently saying, it's just another bureaucratic concept and it's not really something that's relevant for me, and that's the target group that we want to convince and show that they're wrong. And I'm not sure that this solution will prove so.
I think the weakness is in data, and we've been on this for some time now. We don't have enough data, and I think without a passport, we're going to struggle to gather that data. So I think it's an imperative that we have something in this regard.
Thank you, Andrew. We need to wrap this panel up quite shortly, but I'd like to give Martin a possibility to reply to Joost here too before we end this.
Well, as a business owner, just very shortly, for example, the big tech giants trying to own the data. We all know this, and so now when we're starting to sell in Amazon in Germany, we don't get any email addresses from our customers anymore, which complex our relationship. But by saying they get 1 year extra warranty by scanning the QR code, they create a relationship to us that's mutually beneficial, because we have started to build a product lifetime value relationship where we can maybe recycle this product and sell it again at some point, or maybe the family grows and they need another one, and then we can have that dialogue with the consumer. So I think that's something that's often forgotten, that more companies should be forced into a direct-to-consumer relationship, because then the ownership of the relationship becomes much stronger. What we have today is several degrees of removal because you have distributors and other agents between you and the consumer. So we are all about breaking those boundaries down. In the EU legislation problem for small, medium enterprises as myself, it is heavy to do a life cycle analysis properly. That's why we're depending on EU to make this more like applying for a design patent, which only costs a few €100 and you get 27 countries, instead of complying with the WE directive, which makes you sign a paper for each single country in the EU and report, even if maybe you only sell 3 products in Germany, I have to spend many hours on it. So EU have a big role here to create it the right way so it works for small, medium enterprises, so it becomes a powerful tool for democratization of environmental impact. At the end of the day, the definition of circular economy is digging out less out of the earth.
I think we can all agree on this. Yes, excellent, Martin. Well, thanks for the work you do, Andrew, and for Joost, and of course Sacha. And thank you to the panelists. We need to move on. And Sacha, you will stay with me for a wrap up together with Ingmar. So bye-bye and take care, and best of luck with your continuous work in this really important field. Hello there, Ingmar.
Hi.
Interesting panel, and they were not completely in agreement, which I like.
I mean, why have panels if everyone agrees with everyone?
Exactly.
So I think it's great.
So Sacha, reflections from your side on what we just spoke of. I gave Martin the last word about, he was talking about the EU passport, and you didn't get to reflect on that. What is your opinion? Is this a good way forward?
Unfair to elaborate there without having him responding on that again. No, I actually agree. So I mentioned before that transparency is a big issue we're all going to face. And maybe that's something we're aligning now by finishing, and I can give later the word to Ingmar. And the word that maybe is more around at COP26 than ever is greenwashing. And if we do not set up some sort of transparency regulation somewhere, I understand what you said, but still somewhere of regulation needs to come. I don't say it needs to come from the governments, but we need to know more data, where it comes from. But also for us as a company, we at one stage in a lifetime, or with a partner like N2S, we want to take back the systems. And for that, doing a second life, third life, we need to know where it is in order to give. But because if not, then one day it's going to land in Nairobi on landfills, and we don't want that.
Well, thank you very much, Sacha. Ingmar, your main takeaways from this entire day? It's been a long, very full broadcast here.
Yeah, and they are stressing us because we are the last pavilion.
Yeah, they're about to toss us out. That's why we're going to wrap this up.
At the whole COP meeting, yes. And we've been that for every single day.
Yes, we're hanging in there.
That's what it takes, burning the midnight oil in doing climate action. So my main takeaway, I would like to pick up what Sacha was just talking about. Greenwashing or not, what we need is transparency. Transparency is key because we need to know if it's talk, or if it's action behind it. And without transparency, it's impossible. And it's not just about the climate. It's also about information. Because what we have had throughout the whole COP is that communication is key. I mean, we're doing this in order to communicate what we do. If no one knows what Prime Computer are doing, or the previous speaker here, it will not have an impact. It will not scale. We will not change the society. So communication is key. And transparency is super important regarding what company are acting and what company are not acting. So we need more of that. But we also need transparency when it comes to the big tech companies. It's super important. So I would like to encourage all the platforms we are actually using right now. Show you your algorithms. Show how you're doing things. What kind of organic posts are getting the right audience? What kind of organic posts are not getting the audience. Show us how you do it. We Don't Have Time, we're going to publish exactly how our algorithms are working. And I encourage everyone to do the same, because if we don't know who gets the information and who's not get the information, we are not in control. So we're living in a really dangerous world where we don't have free speech. And that's fucked up, to use a language that is strong. We need to change that.
Strong.
And we're here to change it, because if we don't do it, who will?
Strong message, Ingmar Rentzhog. I'm turning now just to Sacha Ghiglione, if you would like to give some call to action from your side.
Well, Ingmar, we often talk, and I just totally 100% agree with what you said. A call to action, yes. So we started at the beginning when we have our exchange, and yes, we have solutions. We saw that today. Yes, we have hope, and we should have hope. Yes, we need more transparency. We need to finish this blah, 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 and need to get into action, and not in 2030 or 2070 like India or whatever. It's now, and there are possibilities, and it shouldn't be about greed, and that's my key message. If you want to do something at home as an individual, well, you can do, and there are enough sources of what you can implement, just you as an individual. But take care of the environment, because we are just borrowing the planet from our children.
Thank you very much, Sacha Ghiglione from Prime Computers, and thank you, Ingmar Rentzhog. And of course, thanks all of you watching and all the speakers that we have had on today on this show. Please join us tomorrow. We have another fantastic day tomorrow. It is Sweden's International Business Day here, actually in another hub, but you'll recognize us, Nick and I, and Ingmar. And we'll talk about pioneering fossil-free solutions. So bye-bye now for now, and take care.
A distant sound